Welcome to Buddhism Seeds, a place where ancient Zen stories are gently brought back to life like a soft breeze to lull you into deep and peaceful sleep. Amid the chaos of modern life, when our minds are constantly racing through plans, worries, and lingering memories, only stillness can truly heal the heart. We often think the past is just old images, but the truth is, it still lives inside us in every reflex, every sudden burst of anger, every silent fear. Sometimes one old word can still keep us awake. One old glance can still make our hearts ache. We think we've moved on, yet we're only carrying broken pieces. And no matter how small they are, those fragments grow heavier, with the years pulling our souls down like stones sinking to the bottom of a lake. Letting go of the past doesn't mean forgetting it. It means no longer letting it lead the present. It's not erasing what hurt us, but no longer letting the pain decide who we are. Because when we keep clinging to old wounds, we are reliving them every day instead of truly living today. Tonight, give yourself permission to feel light. Let your old burdens drift away like dry leaves on a stream. And as you close your eyes, I will tell you a Zen story, the very first story about an old Zen master and his worn-out shoes. Long ago, hidden deep among endless pine forests in the towering White Cloud Mountains, stood an ancient temple. It was not large, nor gilded, nor crowned with grand triple gates like the great temples in town. Yet anyone who had ever stepped foot there would say, time seems to slow down in that place, and people's hearts suddenly grow as still as a mirror lake. In that silent temple lived an elderly Zen master over 80 years old. People in the nearby villages called him by a simple name, Old Master, not because they didn't know his given name, but because to them he felt like part of the land itself, as if the mountain had risen with his silhouette carved upon it, and the ancient pine trees had been his quiet disciples standing by his feet for decades. The old master was known not only for his deep wisdom, but also for something unusual. For years, though, disciples and devotees brought him fine robes, rare items, and elegant shoes from the city. As gifts, he always wore just one faded brown robe and the same pair of cracked, worn leather shoes. Their soles frayed, their surface split like dry earth in summer. People would whisper quietly, "How strange a revered master dressed like a beggar. Maybe he's testing us to see who can respect beyond appearances. Or maybe he's just overly frugal." But eventually, they stopped wondering. Because whenever anyone sat before the old master, all those questions simply faded away. One late autumn afternoon, when the pines had turned yellow and leaves were scattering over the mossy stone steps, a young disciple returned to the temple after months of trading in the city. He was one of the cleverest disciples, quick-thinking, shrewd in business. Down in the city, merchants praised his charm, his sharp eye for goods, his stylish clothes, his confident walk. And in his heart, a thought began to stir. Why does a great master like my teacher still live so simply? That day, after offering gifts from the city, he knelt before the temple porch and looked up at the old master sitting on the stone steps, his thin hands lifting a steaming cup of tea. At his feet were those same cracked, worn-out leather shoes, threads coming loose like wrinkles of time. Unable to hold back, the disciple softly asked Master, "Why don't you get a new pair of shoes?" His voice stayed polite, but his eyes still carried doubt. In the city, there are so many beautiful, sturdy, elegant shoes, more fitting for your position. People would respect you more if you dressed like someone of your honor. Mountain winds brushed through the porch, gently stirring the faded prayer ribbons on the roof. The old master didn't answer right away. He bent down, running his thin fingers gently across the cracked leather, as if touching an old friend. Then he lifted his gaze, soft yet deep, as an ancient well. They still walk. The disciple froze for a moment. Such a simple answer. But the old master continued, voice slow and calm, like forest wind, whispering through leaves. They have carried me through many seasons of sun and rain, over slippery slopes in storms, over icy stones in winter, on silent nights, climbing down to care for the sick. They took the dust of the road so my feet could stay light. They soaked up the rain so my heart could stay dry. Every frayed seam holds a story. Every crack reminds me that I have walked without turning away from hardship. His eyes drifted into the distance as if seeing his youth again. Then he smiled gently, like a quiet sigh. And I don't need new shoes to walk slower, bow lower, and listen deeper to this world. The young disciple was silent, and in that still moment, he suddenly heard pine leaves falling softly on the roof, wind weaving through stone cracks, his own heartbeat very faint. And he understood for years he had lived so loud that he could no longer hear what silence was trying to say. He bowed deeply, not to power, not to glory, but to the humility radiating from a heart that knew what was enough. From that day on, he stopped rushing to replace things to prove success. He learned to mend worn sandals instead of throwing them away, to clean the old wooden table instead of buying a new one, and most of all, to cherish what had walked with him through the years instead of always chasing the next shiny, soulless thing. They say that many years later, when the old master passed away, his disciples opened the small wooden chest under his bed. Inside were no gold coins, no sacred relics, only the faded brown robe and the same old worn shoes. No one cried. They simply knelt, hands folded, because they knew some things do not need gold to shine. Like an old pair of shoes teaching humility, gratitude, and contentment more deeply than any lecture could. Because sometimes what makes us bow our heads is not someone's glory, but the quiet soul of one who has walked through everything and still chooses to walk on in his old shoes. We live in an age where appearances have almost become ID cards of worth. People don't ask what you think, how you feel, or how kindly you live. They ask what brand you wear, which phone you use, what car you drive. Their glances and nods become warped mirrors that shape how you see yourself. And without realizing, you start seeing yourself through their eyes. You measure your worth by their admiration, by whether you get invited into trendy conversations. But have you ever paused to ask, is a person's true worth really in those things? A new pair of shoes might make us look elegant, but it won't make us walk more deeply or stop mid-path just to pick up a fallen leaf and smile. A new coat might give brief confidence, but it won't make us kinder, won't make us patient enough to listen to a wounded soul sitting across from us. We fear being left behind, fear not keeping up, fear looking outdated in a world where everything is replaced each season. So we shop upgrade hoard as if owning more could fill the hollow inside. But the more we have, the more we fear losing it. The more we try to stand out, the more we fear being forgotten. The more we cling to outer layers, the more we lose our inner lightness. Our minds become cramped, like rooms stuffed with clutter, leaving no space for peace to enter. And in this rush, we can no longer even hear our own footsteps, only the crowd's frantic pace, and we walk with them though our hearts never wanted to. That is when we must stop. Not to give up everything, but to remember our true worth never lived in what we wear, but in how we walk gently, deeply, fully present in each step. I'm not telling you to abandon comfort or discard what you've worked hard to earn. Comfort is not wrong. Material things are not evil. I just want you to pause and look around your room. How many things once thrilled you when new made your heart race as you unboxed them, made you think, now I'll be happier. Yet now, lie silent in the corner, covered in dust as if never cherished at all. How many things once made you believe, once I get this, I'll finally feel complete. Yet only days later, the excitement vanished, replaced by emptiness and a new craving, whispering, I need the next thing. What exhausts us is not lack, but never feeling enough. We think we're chasing happiness, but really, we are being driven by the fear of not enough, an imagined hole that no thing can ever fill. A person who feels enough is not someone with less than others, just someone who doesn't need more than they needed yesterday. They still work, dream, strive, but are no longer haunted by the race. They don't need to prove to win, to always be ahead. They live amid the chaos of the city, under flashing billboards, yet their hearts are as light as walking barefoot on dewy grass at dawn. They can sit by a chipped old teacup and feel as peaceful as someone who just found treasure. Have you ever met someone like that? Their eyes don't sparkle from jewelry, but from peace. Their laughter doesn't thunder from victory, but drifts soft like the wind, because they have nothing left to lose. And their presence makes you want to sit down, breathe slower, speak softer, and somehow live slower. Because they remind you happiness isn't in having more, but in pausing to see you already have enough. The old shoes of the Zen master don't teach us to be outdated or reject all new things. They teach something far more vital. Don't let the world define you by what you wear. You are not the brand on your shirt, not the logo on your collar, not the number in your bank account, not the digits rising and falling in a banking app, not the things in your closet, no matter how expensive or admired they once were. Your true worth is not in what can be bought, but in what no one can buy for you. The way you walk through this world, the way you treat each person, you meet the way you keep your heart pure in a tempting world. Do you slow down to truly listen, or just rush past every meeting, every life, like someone afraid of missing a train? Do you bow low to understand, or look down from above measuring people by their status or what they can give you? Do you embrace life with a content heart, or cling to it with a starving heart, always fearing not enough, not fast enough, not better than others? When you feel enough, you don't need much to feel rich. You don't need to stand out to feel worthy. You don't need to win to feel your life matters, because when the heart is full, everything that comes is a gift. Everything that leaves is a gift. But if you don't feel enough, no matter how much you gain, your heart stays hollow. You will live in a race with no finish line, always buying more, doing more, forcing more, until you no longer know who you are without all those things. Feeling enough doesn't mean stopping growth. It means growing from the inside out, not the outside in. It means every step is steady, every word sincere, every glance warm, because you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. The old shoes of the Zen master didn't make him smaller in the world's eyes. They made him greater, because they remind us to live rightly, deeply, gently, is already enough. I tell you this story not to make you throw away your new shoes, nor to reject beauty, comfort, or modern life. I only want to remind you of something small yet easily forgotten in this dazzling age. Don't lose your soul while decorating your shell. Because one day, everything you've bought will fade. Expensive shoes will fray. Trendy clothes will go out of style. The things that once thrilled you will sit still in the corner as if never loved at all. And the only thing left will not be how much you owned, but how you lived. Did you walk gently through someone's life? Did you pause to hear the sorrow in their eyes? Did you slow down enough to see the sunrise, not just your crowded schedule? We think newness is found in shiny things, but sometimes the truly new hides inside the old. A heart lighter because it no longer competes. Steps slower because they no longer chase. A smile deeper because it no longer needs to prove anything, only to live sincerely. And then you realize true newness doesn't come from what you wear, but from your soul, when it stops chasing appearances and starts returning to itself. So try living slowly, just for one day. Step off the treadmill of tasks, places, goals. Try walking the old shoes into the city. They won't make you stand out. No one will turn their head. But they've carried you through many rains and suns, through countless steps you once rushed through forgetting you were alive. And this time, instead of rushing, walk slowly. Listen to the soles tapping the ground. Feel your feet pressing the earth as if growing roots. Just a few steps like this, and you might be surprised to realize the world was never urging you to hurry. Only your mind, afraid of falling behind, kept pushing you faster. And maybe, in that moment, you'll see something we all forget. Happiness is not at the end of the road. It is under every step, if your heart is light. Because happiness was never a destination. It is the state of someone who keeps walking without being dragged by fear. And sometimes just one slow day is enough to see. You don't need to go farther to find happiness. You only need to walk slower, to touch it right where you are. There are moments in life when pain arrives like a storm. It gives no warning, doesn't knock, only suddenly crashes in and sweeps away everything we thought would stay forever. And then you find yourself standing there in a cold, empty space, holding the fragments of a person, a dream, a life that's gone. I understand. Because sooner or later, everyone will stand in the silent ruins inside their own heart. And in that moment, you need to hear an old story, gentle as a breeze, yet strong enough to awaken a heart gone desolate. Back when the Buddha still walked the earth, his barefoot followers traced a path along the forest's edge. A brief rain had just passed. The scent of damp soil and wet leaves rose like a green stick of incense. On the grass, beads of water still clung shimmering in the first rays of sun, breaking into tiny mirror-like pieces of light. Birds on the solid tree shook out their feathers and called to one another, making the grove feel pure, as if the morning had just been neatly folded. Amid that stillness, a sound rose that did not belong to nature sobbing. At first, it was thin as a thread, then slowly thickened, tightened in the throat, and suddenly tore open like someone ripping a piece of silk. The disciples glanced at one another. No one spoke, but all slowed their steps. The Buddha stopped. Beneath an old sala tree, beside a moss-speckled stone marker, a thin woman knelt, collapsed. Her tangled hair held droplets of rain. Her eyes were red eyelids trembling like a candle flame in wind. She clutched the cold gravestone with both hands, as if trying to hold tight to a body already merged with the earth. Beside her sat a cracked clay jar with a few withered petals in the mouth. Loosened petals lay scattered on the dark ground. When the Buddha stepped closer, she startled and looked up. In her dark pupils was a sky of storm and despair. Her voice was hoarse. "Please, is there any way to bring him back? How can I live when the one I love is gone, leaving me alone like the last leaf of the season?" Not a single bird call broke the space. The Buddha sat down beside her, not rushing to console her, not speaking of anything lofty. His eyes were kind, as flat and still as a lake where all ripples have stilled. A brief silence. Then he spoke softly, as wind passing through leaves. "If you can bring me a handful of mustard seeds taken from a household where no one has ever died, I will bring your beloved back to life." The words fell like a rope let down from a cliff face. The woman grabbed it. Hope, which had just wilted, flashed again. She sprang up, wiped her tears with a wet sleeve, bowed, and hurried down the red dirt path toward the village. Behind her, the forest closed. The smell of rain lingered. The small village nestled along a hillside, low roofs peeking under bamboo canopies. She stopped at the first door and knocked quickly. A middle-aged man opened it, surprised to see a stranger splashed with mud. "What do you need?" I'm asking, for a handful of mustard seeds. "Just a handful." "But please tell me, has anyone in your house ever passed away?" He froze. His eyes dimmed, his voice lowered. "My father died last year during flood season. We still keep his jacket in the chest, so the kitchen smoke smell won't fade. I have seeds, but our home isn't the one you're looking for." She pressed her lips together. Hope dimmed a shade, but didn't go out. She bowed thanks and hurried to the second house. The door opened a crack. A young mother held a newborn. Dark rings circled her eyes. Hearing the question, she held the baby closer. "I buried my first child 3 months ago. This one is heaven's gift to make up for it. I have mustard seeds, but our home already knows loss." The woman fell silent, and a strange ache passed through her, the ache of another's loss reflecting her own. She nodded and moved on. At the third house, an old man leaning on a cane came out. After listening, he slowly shook his head. "I sent my wife off the year before last. The teapot is still on the stove like the day she came back from the market, but didn't have time to pour. My son rebuilt the eaves so rain wouldn't splash her altar. Child, this old house isn't where you'll find what you seek. The fourth house, the fifth. Every open door was a story. Some lost to illness, to accidents, to old age, to a nameless fever. Every home held a space named with tears. A man had lost his mother. A young woman had just buried her husband. A child had lost an uncle. Neighbors had helped each other through a hard night. Wherever she knocked, the answer blew in the same direction. Someone in our house has gone. The sun rose and then dipped low. The red dirt path showed overlapping, hurried footprints. The mud dried, cracking into fine spiderweb lines. At dusk, she reached the last house on the village edge, a straw-roofed hut with a thin ribbon of kitchen smoke. A little boy opened the door, staring curiously. Her voice was already rasping as she repeated the question. "Has anyone in your home ever died?" The boy hesitated, then called inside. "Grandma." An old voice answered. "Tell our guest our house is like every house child. Your grandpa went with the wind long ago." The final answer was a gentle period. No tragedy, No dramatics, only a simple truth steady as a heartbeat. She gave thanks. She didn't ask for seeds anymore. Her arms hung loose. Her legs felt heavy as if weighed with stone. But strangely, her tears were gone. She turned back up the small slope toward the forest's edge. When she reached the sala tree, the sky was falling into sunset. The last light dusted the bark with tiny grains of gold. The Buddha still sat there as if he had not moved. The ground had dried in the breeze. The damp had sunk back, leaving the forest's soft fragrance behind. She knelt, touching her forehead to the earth. This time her voice was very soft, but no longer shattered. I went through the whole village. There is no house where no one has ever died. The Buddha looked at her and nodded. In his gaze, there was no surprise, no pity, only the compassionate understanding of one who has seen life as the forest sees sun and rain. You see, he said, every roof has opened its door to impermanence. No one can keep the person they love forever under a mortal roof. But knowing this, people learn to love one another more fully, while still together. She looked up. For a moment, it was as if the faraway sound of her own morning sobs returned and then dissolved. She looked at her thin hands. Small veins traced the skin like a delicate map, pointing to only one place, the heart. I understand now, she whispered. A breeze slipped through. The withered petal in the jar tilted and fell, lying still. She picked it up and set it on her palm. The petal had faded so thin that the sunset shone through it, drawing a light thread. She thought even a fallen petal once bloomed. And because it once bloomed, nothing is lost, only changed in form. The Buddha did not hurry her. He let silence do its work. Then he asked, as if about some ordinary small thing, "What will you do when you go home?" She took a breath. She looked around. The grass no longer sparkled as much. The little path had darkened. The insects were about to begin their song. She answered slowly, "I will light a lamp, tidy the room, fold the clothes he liked to wear, not to forget, but to remember in a different way. I will cook the first meal without crying. I will open the window for the wind to enter, so the house can breathe again." Her eyes were moist, but her lips no longer trembled. She added, "I will visit the young mother at the end of the lane. I know she is lost too. Perhaps I can hold her baby for an afternoon." The Buddha smiled, a gentle line added to a painting already complete. He said, "When you share sorrow, sorrow becomes a road back to one another. When you light a lamp in someone else's house, the light also brightens the room within you." She bowed her head. The breeze carried the scent of post-rain earth and old sala wood. This time that fragrance did not make her sad. It only reminded her that everything comes and goes in its own seasons. Night fell as she returned to the village. The red dirt road beneath her feet had dried, showing her footprints clearly, no longer staggering. She walked past the homes she had knocked on that morning. At each roof, she paused a moment, looking up at the small golden squares of window where silhouettes moved like shadow puppets. Someone cradling a child, someone putting a pot on to boil, someone combing their hair at a mirror. Each lit frame was a story. Each story was a way of loving and a moment of loss, and all of them were continuing. At her own door, her hand hesitated on the wooden latch. She pushed it open. The house smelled familiar, old matte sun-warmed clothes, the scent of someone long away. She set the cracked jar on the table, gathered the fallen petals, and replaced them with a few fresh sprigs from the garden. She kindled the stove. The flame caught, flared, then gentled. In the firelight, a chipped bowl looked as if it were smiling. She opened the chest and took out his shirt. Before each touch made her break down. This time she smoothed it, folded it neatly, and set it by her side, like placing a story that had been fully told. Not to put it away forever, only so it would no longer snag and reopen as a wound. She ate a small bowl of rice with salt and peanuts and sipped warm water. Then she opened the window. Night air poured in, stirring the thin curtain. From nearby came a child's laughter. From farther away, the temple bell sounded a long singing line that faded into the dark. She leaned against the frame and looked at the black sky studded with bits of stars. She closed her eyes and whispered not a plea, not a lament, but a greeting. Wherever you are, if you can hear me, be at peace. I'm still here. I will go on living. A little more each day. When I miss you, I will smile. Night passed lightly, like a hand laid on the brow of someone who has just stopped crying. The next morning, she carried a basket of vegetables to the young mother at the end of the lane. The baby sleeping in her arms pursed its lips as if dreaming of milk. The mother's eyes widened in surprise. Then a tired but warm smile appeared. The woman held the child, patting gently, listening to the tiny, even breaths. In that moment, her heart, which had felt like a locked house, sounded the click of a latch opening. Word of her spread through the village, not as some odd tale, but as a simple habit. She would hold a child when someone's arms were tired. She changed the water in the temple vase. She sent messages like, "Come have porridge with me this evening." No one spoke about her loss anymore. People only saw the way she stayed with life. One noon, she walked past the old sala tree. Its shade lay cool and wide. The stone marker remained moss-clinging like memory that refused to part. She placed a fresh twig there and sat. She did not cry. She told a few small things, the day's ordinary happenings, as if he were sitting right there, chin in hand, listening. The wind stirred the branches, and a shaft of sunlight slipped through to draw a golden fish on the ground. She smiled. From within the forest came very soft footsteps. She looked up. The Buddha stood a few steps away, his gaze as peaceful as the first afternoon they met. No need to ask more, no need to teach more. Everything was in its place. "Are you well?" he asked, voice low enough for just the two to hear. "Yes, I'm learning how to be with what remains," she answered. "That is how to be with your own self," he said. "When you feel pain, remember to open the door. The wind will enter. When you feel lonely, remember to step to the next house. They too are waiting for a knock." She nodded. The Buddha pressed his palms together and bowed slightly. Then he and the disciples went on just as that morning's slow, even light. The footprints on the path would soon be erased by wind, but the peace of the meeting soaked into the soil, into roots, into every fiber of old wood, like a note that continues to ring after the instrument is still. That evening, sitting on her porch, she set the cracked jar before her. The crack did not close, but through it, the lamplight from inside shone out, drawing a thin streak on the ground. She gazed at that streak for a long time, and suddenly, everything seemed simple. Some things do not return. Some things will continue. And some things like light through a crack are beautiful only because they pass through a lack. She lifted a hand to touch the rim of the jar, then drew it back. At her fingertip lingered a faint floral scent, like morning in the forest. She smiled a smile both new and old. Above night had fully settled, but within her, another dawn was beginning. And so the story closes without truly ending, because every roof in the village, every step by the forest's edge, every fallen petal beside the stone marker keeps telling its part of a gentle truth. Everyone will lose someone. No one can keep what they love forever under a mortal roof. But if we know this, we will love one another more fully while we are still together. Do you see a part of yourself in that woman? Maybe you have lost someone dear, a love that once meant everything, a dream you lived and breathed for, or even a part of yourself, the part that was innocent, hopeful, and bright as the first morning of life. And perhaps, like her, you have held the past the way you'd cling to a cold gravestone. You've gripped memories, keepsakes, old letters, faded photos, because you think that if you let go, you would betray them, betray what once felt sacred. You fear that if you stop hurting, it means you've forgotten. You fear that if you move on, you're stepping on what once mattered most. But the truth is, you don't betray the past by moving forward. You simply stop letting the past imprison you. Because real love doesn't require you to chain yourself to suffering to prove it. Love is not a shackle. Love is a pair of wings, and wings are not born to lie under a gravestone. We often mistake pain as proof of love. We think if the heart no longer bleeds, the love must have faded. But no, true love is not measured by tears, but by how you live after the loss. Those who have gone don't need your suffering to be remembered. They need you to keep living, to live your share fully. If you sink into grief day after day, you are no longer living. You are only existing as a shadow of the one who is gone. And shadows cannot hold anyone, cannot love anyone, cannot bring light to anyone. Clinging to loss doesn't make the pain vanish. It only makes you slowly vanish into it. You begin to drift from those still beside you. You stop hearing your child's laughter, stop feeling the warmth of a friend's hand, stop noticing the sunlight spilling through the window each morning. Day by day, you think you're living with the pain, but in truth, you're letting the pain live in your place. It's time to understand. Letting go of grief is not betraying love. It is the only way for love to keep living in a new form through you. I know. Letting go isn't easy. Old pain isn't somewhere far away, not in your hands to take off, not in a closet to clear out. It's in your very fibers, woven into your heartbeat, hidden in sudden nighttime silences, in the vacant stare toward a familiar corner where they once were. The pain is like a wound that hasn't closed one accidental touch, and you go silent with hurt, as if time had never moved since the moment of loss. So when someone tells you, just forget, you can't. Not because you're weak, but because the pain has become part of your body, like a tiny thorn embedded in flesh, making every movement bleed a little. But healing doesn't begin with forgetting. No one heals by forcing themselves to forget something that was once their very lifeblood. Healing begins with accepting the truth that life is impermanent, that everything we love, hold, and swear will stay forever, will change shape, slip from our hands one day. And that is not your fault. It is not anyone's punishment of you. Loss is simply part of life, as sunset is part of the day, and yellow leaves are part of a beautiful autumn. Imagine life as a garden. Each season, some flowers bloom in brilliance, their fragrance intoxicating the heart. Then they fade. Petals fall to the soil, quietly decomposing to nourish new green shoots. If you keep clinging to the wilted petals, holding them in your hands, you will miss the whole garden blooming around you. New colors, new scents, good things arriving, that need you present to receive them. Letting go doesn't mean throwing away. It means looking straight at the truth the flowers have fallen, but spring will return. The person is gone, but the love you shared will turn into strength within you to keep walking. When you accept this truth, you'll see that pain is no longer a prison, but a rain that has passed, leaving the garden moist and soft, ready for new seeds to sprout. Have you ever paused to ask yourself that what we fear most after loss is not the loss itself, but the vast space it leaves behind? We don't just cry because they're gone, but because the familiar sounds suddenly go quiet. Because each morning, there are no footsteps on the porch, no laughter warming the kitchen, no figure to call by name when the heart wavers. We fear the room feels too wide, chairs are now extra, the table is short, one pair of chopsticks, and night is so silent we can hear the clock hand move. We fear having to keep living when the other is no longer here to witness the road ahead with us. But that empty space is not the enemy. It's not a pit meant to swallow you, but new ground waiting for you to sow different seeds of love. The space is a gentle reminder that you are still alive, that your heart still beats, and can still love those who are present, love what remains, and love the rest of your own life. You cannot keep the one who's gone, they belong to a season that has passed. But you can keep the love you shared, not by locking yourself in grief, but by living fully for those who are still here. Let the love you had not die with the loss, but become the light guiding your next steps. Let that empty space become a new garden where you plant seeds of care, gentleness, and connection, because in the way you continue to love, the one who left continues to live not in the old form, but in every smile you bring to those still here. Today, people often comfort one another with, "Time will heal." It sounds gentle, but the truth is, time itself heals nothing. Time only passes, and your pain, if you do nothing with it, will sit like a stone in your chest, not disappearing, only sinking deeper. It's how you use time that decides whether you heal. You can spend time sitting and replaying painful memories, asking what if day after day, counting the months since they left, reminding yourself over and over how much you lost. You can bury yourself in regret, but that only lets the pain root deeper, like a poisonous tree growing in your heart. Or you can use that same time to slowly step into the light. Use time to learn to smile when you remember to let beautiful memories become a gentle part of you, rather than a blade that keeps cutting. Use time to speak a kinder word to someone beside you, to hold someone a little longer as if you know they too are only passing guests in this world. Use time to live as if each moment is a fragile gift, not a right that will last forever. Because the truth is, none of us knows who will still be here tomorrow. No one can promise the name you call every day will always answer. And precisely because of that, the only thing we can do is love each other fully today. Every look, every word, every embrace could be the last. So don't use time to wait for pain to fade. Use it so those who are still here can feel your love right now, while you still have the chance to speak, to touch, to love. In the end, it isn't time that heals you. It's love, the love you choose to plant in the smallest moments of today. Impermanence doesn't come to take your happiness away. It comes to remind you not to wait until things are gone to begin cherishing them. Too many of us only see the value of something after it's vanished. We chase distant goals, argue over trivial things, and only when the room is empty, when the chair beside us has no one sitting, do we sit for hours with an old photo dazed because a familiar breath has turned into memory. Don't wait until the last conversation has ended to wish you had spoken a loving word. Don't wait until time has taken someone to realize they were the whole sky in your life. By then, what you wanted to give has no one left to receive it, and what remains is regret, gnawing day after day. Impermanence is not an enemy, but a bell that wakes us. Every shared moment is unique, and none of us knows how many more times we'll see that smile, hear that voice, or hold that hand. So look deeply into the eyes of the one you love today. Listen to them slowly, hold them long, and let each shared moment become a ritual of gratitude. Only by living fully in the present will you not have to say, if only, when impermanence knocks. The story of the woman weeping at the grave is not only a tale from long ago, it's the story of me, of you, of all of us, because everyone loses something: a dear person, a love, a dream, or a part of oneself. And after those losses, we must all learn how to go on living. Not living as if we had never hurt, not pretending strength while hiding deep scars, but living, though still in pain, with a heart made lighter. Lighter not because the pain is gone, but because we stop carrying it like a stone we must haul forever. When you learn to let go of pain, you do not lose love. Love is not in the tears you shed each night, nor in the way you lock yourself inside old memories. True love is in how you continue to live and continue to love, even with spaces that can never be filled. You don't betray the one who's gone by moving forward. You only stop letting pain keep you from loving again. And that is how love does not die with loss, but turns into a gentle light that walks with you for the rest of your life. Tonight, if your heart feels heavy, as if you were carrying a gray sky on your shoulders, set aside the sighs for a while and try to imagine the one you love, the one who left, or the one who cannot return, smiling softly at you from a far, peaceful place. They would not want to see you collapsed, would not want your longing for them to become chains binding you to the past. They would whisper, "We loved each other, and that was real. That love doesn't vanish when I'm gone. It lives on in your every breath. So please keep living, because that is how you keep me with you in each heartbeat." Then close your eyes and breathe deep. Let your tears fall not as shards of a broken heart, but as petals leaving the branch closing one season, so that tomorrow a new green shoot can rise from the very place where pain once lay. Because you deserve peace. Because those you love, whether here or gone, deserve to see you smile again, deserve to know that the love they gave you did not become a tomb, but has turned into a steady light to help you walk through the dark. And because life is still waiting for you to go on living, not with a heart sunk in the past, but with a heart radiant in this fragile present, where every breath you take is a fresh chance to begin again. There are things we think have fallen asleep in the past, but in truth are still living in every breath of the present. A letter, a keepsake, a promise left unfulfilled, sometimes as small as a scrap of paper, and yet it can bind our hearts for an entire lifetime. I want to tell you a story about a woman who held on to an old letter for 40 years and how she learned that love is not holding on, but gratitude and letting go. Back then, she was just in her early 20s. Her youth was like a tender sprout just breaking through, carried off by the wind before it could fully bloom. The war had ended, but it didn't leave peace, only scattered gaps like scorch marks on old walls, like sudden silences at midday that make the heart jump. The small village on the hillside where she lived used to ring with laughter each afternoon. Now there were only roofs leaning silent in the sun, and wooden doors shut tight like eyes that didn't dare look straight at the past. Her young husband left on a misty morning just after the rains had stopped, when the last drop still clung to the roof tiles, sparkling like words of a promise unfinished. He slung on his pack, turned to look at her, smiled, and promised, "I will come back." But he never returned. The only thing he left was a letter. Just a few short lines scrawled as if hastily written at some distant army post. "I will come back. Take care of yourself. Wait for me." She waited, year after year, season after season. As friends her age took wedding veils, held their firstborns, and saw their parents off across the fields, she still stood quietly on the porch, looking toward the path winding around the hill, as if with enough patience the familiar figure would appear from afar. She placed the letter in a small wooden box, wrapped it in purple velvet, and set it on the highest shelf. On his death day, she opened it, touched each word blurred like little rivers, and read in silence as if speaking with a soul unwilling to leave. For 40 years, she never left that little village, never opened her heart to anyone else, never wrote another letter to anyone. People called her faithful. They called it eternal love. They looked into her deep-set eyes as if at a sad legend and whispered, "She must have loved him so much." But who knew that each night, lying in her empty room, listening to the clock tick like the needle of time stitching each second into her heart, she no longer heard his footsteps. She heard only the sound of her own youth falling grain by grain, fragile as ash. And so she went on, not crying, not laughing in a world that had stopped waiting while she remained still. Until one afternoon, with the sky the color of honey, she met a Zen master passing through the village. He sat by the porch of a small tea shop, thin of frame, but with eyes bright like an oil lamp at night, a gaze so light it seemed to see the darkest corners of a person's heart. She walked up and, without knowing why, told him her story. About the letter, about 40 years of waiting, about the empty room, about dreams that hadn't had time to grow old. The master listened quietly, thin fingers moving along his mala beads. Then he asked, his voice so soft she thought it might be the breeze. "In that wooden box, is it love, or is it the fear of living when love is gone?" She froze. The question fell into her heart like a small stone onto a frozen lake, and the surface began to crack. For the first time in 40 years, someone didn't call her story romantic, didn't praise it as an epic love, but saw it as a binding rope. The master looked deeply into her eyes and went on, his voice light as a breeze yet sharp as a blade. "Memories are precious, but if you keep holding a wilted petal, your hand will have no space to welcome spring." She lowered her gaze. Suddenly she realized her hand had curled tight for who knows how long, and in it not a petal, only the dust of days already gone. Have you ever been like her? Do you have an invisible letter you still clutch in your heart? Not with your hands, but with every heartbeat. Is there someone who left long ago but still quietly lives in every choice you make and every step you hesitate to take, as if moving forward would mean betraying them? Memories aren't wrong. They are the precious part of life, proof that you have loved, lived wholeheartedly, and given your heart without hesitation. But when memories become chains, you are no longer living. You are only standing guard over the past. You trade away each day of the present to protect what has been lost, holding tight to what no longer exists. And while you keep staring backward, life quietly moves forward and waits for no one. You think you're being loyal to the past, but in truth, you're abandoning the self you have today. You no longer hear the laughter of those still beside you, no longer see the small chances blooming each morning because your eyes are fixed on a faded frame. And listen, the past does not need you to stand watch. It doesn't need a thin, sleepless guard to keep intruders out of memory. What the past needs is for you to go on living, so that the love you had does not die in regret, but becomes the strength that helps you love what still exists. Because if you keep guarding the past, you will miss the present right in front of you, where life is still blooming, whether you look or not. I'm not telling you to forget. No one can forget someone they loved deeply, because those people didn't just walk beside us. They became a part of us. True love doesn't disappear. It only changes form. From a person who once sat next to you, into a gentle voice in your mind when you lose your way. From a held hand, into a soft reminder to live more kindly, love more, and be more patient with this life. From eyes that once looked at you with tenderness, into a quiet light that lifts you when you think you can't rise again. But you cannot live fully if you keep standing in the shadow of the past. You cannot open a new door in your life if your hand still grips an old key that no longer opens anything. You cannot see today's colors if every day you carry the old letter like a charm, because each time you read it, you aren't just reading the letter, you're rereading the pain, and when pain is repeated too long, it becomes a silent cell, making you forget that outside the sun still shines, flowers still bloom, and those who love you are still waiting for your smile. Peace is not in holding. Holding only makes your mind heavier and your heart smaller, just big enough to cradle what's gone. Peace is in accepting that it's time to put it down. Not to put it down to forget, but so you can hold this life with both hands, empty but warm. Because sometimes letting go is not giving up on love. It's the only way for love to keep living through you in this present moment. You know, some people leave, but leave within us a light that never goes out. That light isn't there for you to stand inside it forever, motionless like a memorial statue, but for you to carry to illuminate the path you must keep walking. We often think loving someone means keeping them at our side forever, but the truth is, love isn't possession. It's in how we keep living after they're no longer here. Real love doesn't need you to stand still. It needs you to move forward with a heart still capable of love. Love is not forcing yourself to remain where they left, not living day after day in the old room, keeping everything as if they might return any moment. When you do that, you are not holding on to them. You are freezing your own life. True love is living a life that would make them proud to look down and see. It's letting them, wherever they are, still smile and say, they are living well, living as radiant as when I was beside them. Don't wait for them to come back, but carry what they gave you, every encouragement, every loving glance, every last hand clasp, and weave it into a present worth living. That is the only way love won't die with loss, but become a gentle force that carries you through your darkest days. Those who've gone don't need you to stand forever in their light. They need you to take that light farther toward the future, where life is still waiting for you to go on. I want you to look back at yourself slowly and honestly. Are you living like someone who is waiting, or like someone truly alive? Have you ever, without realizing it, turned away from a new joy? Because deep down, you think you're not allowed to be happy without them. That if you smile too much, if you enjoy life too fully, you'd be betraying their memory. Have you ever pushed away someone who genuinely loves you because your heart is still locked with the key of the past? You fear that if you open the door, new wind will erase the old scent, that if you let someone in, the old image will fade. So you shut your heart, keeping everything motionless like an abandoned house that keeps all the old furniture, but no longer has the warmth of life. But listen, you are not betraying old love if you love again. True love doesn't demand you stand like a stone statue for the rest of your life. The one who left doesn't need you to freeze your youth to honor them. They need you to keep living and to live a life worthy of love. Opening your heart doesn't erase what you had. It only enlarges your heart like a garden needing sunlight to keep blooming. Old love may be a tree that has grown into an ancient trunk, and new love will be the shoots sprouting around it, proof that your heart did not die with loss, but keeps quietly budding, leafing, and turning toward the sun. Don't live only as someone who is waiting, because waiting isn't loyalty. It's how you lose each day you're given. Live as someone truly alive. That is the most fitting way to honor the love you had and not miss the love still seeking you today. The world today teaches us many ways to keep things. Keep old photos in a box. Keep old messages in an outdated phone. Keep yellowed letters in a drawer, like relics of a time of passionate love. But almost no one teaches us how to set things down. No one tells you this love doesn't need to be proven by sacrificing your whole life to guard a silhouette. You don't have to live forever in a room of memories to prove how deeply you once loved. True love doesn't ask you to stop living. It only hopes you will keep living lighter, brighter, deeper. In fact, gratitude is the deepest form of love. Grateful that you loved and were loved, that there were days when your heart raced at a familiar voice, that you laughed together over life's smallest things. Grateful you had each other, even if only for a brief stretch, because not everyone gets to hold someone's hand and feel they're in the right place at the right time. And gratitude is not keeping what's left. Gratitude is going on, living fully your share of life and living a little of the part they didn't get to live, going to the places they dreamed of, doing the things they encouraged you to try, loving the people around you the way they loved you. That is how love is not buried with faded keepsakes, but becomes a quiet light guiding your way. Remember, you don't betray old love by moving forward. You are turning that love into motivation to live more fully, so that each day you live is a gentle thank you to the one who was once your whole sky. The old letter did not bring the woman's happy days back. It only locked her in a moment of loss, a moment long past, replaying in her mind like a sad song that never ends. She was no longer living in the present. She was existing in a long ago that refused to close. And please don't let that happen to you. Memories are precious, but they are not a place to stay forever. Keep them the way we keep a painting. Hang it on the wall, so that when you remember, you pause to look and smile gently, then return to the life unfolding before you. Don't clutch the painting all day. Don't let it block the light of other paintings waiting for you to create. If you cling forever to the past, you won't have hands free to receive the present, nor heart free to feel what's arriving. You deserve new paintings. You deserve to love again, not because you've forgotten, but because love deserves to keep living, not be buried. And your courage to step forward will be the most beautiful thank you to what once loved you. Then one spring morning, after speaking with the Zen master, the old woman quietly stepped into the familiar room where the small wooden box had lain still for 40 years. She touched the thin layer of dust on the lid, dust of time, of seasons past, of youth quietly falling like unnoticed petals. She opened the box. The old letter was still there, fragile as a sliver of the past, trembling in the wind of the present. She lifted the letter, pressed it to her heart, closed her eyes, and whispered, her voice trembling like a silk thread, but gentler than ever. Thank you for loving me. No more sobs, no shoulders shaking with restraint. Only a lightness, like setting down a heavy thing carried so long you'd forgotten you were tired. Then she walked to the back garden where a small stream ran sparkling in the sun. She set the letter on the water. The paper drifted, turned a few times, and carried away 40 years of youth that had slept in the shadow of waiting. She stood there for a long while with the murmur of water and the first warm light of the season, and for the first time, she smiled without tears. That smile wasn't because she had forgotten, but because she finally chose to go on living as the only way for the love they had, not to fade, but to become a gentle light, guiding the days ahead. Can you do that for yourself? You don't need a stream. You don't need an actual letter. You only need to choose to let go of what has grown too heavy. Because you may not realize it every day, you clutch the past, you trade away the moments of the present. You walk without truly touching the ground. You breathe without feeling the breath because your mind still circles what is no longer there. Life is still waiting for you, not for you to keep living in the past like a shadow, but to truly live in the present with all the vitality and light still in you. Set the old letter down. Let your hands grow light. Give your heart some space for a new spring to come, in a spring of peace, of love, and of the things waiting for you to open your heart and receive. There are battles long since over, yet they still echo in a person's mind as if they happened just yesterday. No more gun smoke, no more shouts, no more blood and mud, but a single small sound, a fleeting scent can make that person startle and gasp as if thrown back onto the battlefield. I want to tell you the story of an old soldier, about a war drum's beat and about wounds that aren't on the body but deep in the soul. Long ago, in a small riverside village, there was a soldier who had walked out of fire and smoke. Back then, he was the pride of his unit, always volunteering for the front line, always rushing into the most dangerous places without once hesitating. People said there were battles so fierce, the sky itself seemed to darken. Yet he was still the first across the trenches, shouting commands through the whistle of bullets, his eyes burning like a flame that couldn't be put out. Then the war ended. The guns fell silent. Victory flags flew, and he returned with only one arm and eyes that seemed forever fixed on a place no one else could see. The riverside village welcomed him home like a hero. People flocked in. Everyone wanted to see the one who had been praised as the steel wall of the unit. They raised flags, strung bright lanterns all along the riverbank, red ribbons streaming in the wind like the blood once shed for today's peace. Children ran and laughed. Adults lifted cups of strong wine, and in the center of the village square, a great drum was set in solemn place, waiting for the first strike to announce the festival's start. When the village head lifted the mallet, the first drumbeat thundered like a clap of storm spreading through the valley, rattling roof tiles and tree branches. And at that very moment he turned pale. His eyes flew wide, his remaining hand clenched as if gripping an invisible rifle. His whole body shook. His breath came in gasps, his chest heaving as if he were sprinting for his life through a hail of fire. Then suddenly he screamed a rough, broken scream and charged straight into the stunned crowd, barking commands, trampling red ribbons as if stepping on enemy corpses, seeing no festival, only bodies, falling hands raised for help amid smoke and fire, hearing only bullets, bombs and screams shattering the sky as if they had never stopped. People panicked and fled. Children wailed. Someone called his name. Someone tried to grab that one arm to pull him back, but he tore free, stumbled off like a beast cornered, and disappeared into the bamboo groves by the river. From that day on, no one saw him at village festivals again. Each spring, as flags flew and drums rose in the temple yard, people saw his door shut tight, the light inside gone dark, and behind that old wooden door was only a man curled up in the shadows, clutching his head, trembling, gasping as if trying to survive an invisible battle. No one understood why. No blood showed, no wounds could be seen. To them, the war had ended long ago, turned into a line in the history books. Only he knew that in his mind, the war had never ended. And so in a village lively once more, there remained a house at the river's end, where the festival drum did not bring joy, but only woke nightmares that never truly slept. Modern life is full of such war drums, not booming on a battlefield, yet powerful enough to make a heart lurch. Breath-cut short hands go cold in an instant. Someone who was once betrayed may hear a passing lie and feel the whole world collapse, not because the lie is so grave, but because it recalls the crack of trust long ago, when they gave their whole heart and received cruel deceit in return. A child once shamed and scolded before the class, shrinking under contemptuous stares, may grow into an adult who seems strong and confident on the outside, but at a single shout, their inner heart clenches palms, sweating as if they were still standing in that classroom, small, helpless, and ashamed. Someone who once lost everything, was abandoned, was treated as a burden, may later see someone merely furrow their brow or give a cool look, and their mind instantly imagines being abandoned again. Even if no one truly intends to leave them, their trauma is so used to departures that it always prepares to hurt first. Psychological trauma leaves no scars on the skin, so outsiders don't see it, don't know a memory bomb just exploded in their head because of an ordinary sentence, don't know the hands trembling under the table are shaking because old nightmares have returned. But the person themselves knows very well. They live with those wounds hour by hour, minute by minute, breath by breath. They wake each morning as if stepping out of a battle and try to smile so no one will notice they're still trembling inside. So don't be quick to judge someone's reaction. What you call too sensitive may be a war drum that tightens their heart because of hurts that never healed. This society often teaches you to be strong, to get over it, to forget it, to stand up without crying. From childhood, you were told that crying is weakness, trembling is failure. Heartbreak is a sign of lacking grit. But have you ever asked yourself, is true strength pretending you don't hurt? The old soldier in this story was not weak because he shook at the drumbeat. He had once been braver than anyone facing death by a hair's breadth. Yet a single drum made him go pale and scream as if back on the field, not because his courage was gone, but because he carried a wound that had never been healed. And likewise, you are not weak when you grieve, when you lose sleep, when you panic in the night. You aren't broken or a problem, you are simply a human being who needs holding, listening, and healing. Emotions are not your enemy. They are signals that a part of you is hurting and calling for help. No one is weak for needing help. On the contrary, admitting you need help is a rare kind of courage. It requires taking off the strong mask society has forced on you for too long, daring to face the pieces inside, and daring to believe you are still worthy of love, even if you're not perfect. Weakness is not when you cry. Weakness is when you hurt, but still pretend you don't. When you let pain quietly pile up in the dark until it grows so large, it drowns you, when all it might have taken was once asking, once reaching out for a hug, and things could have softened long ago. So don't strain yourself to be strong by someone else's definition. Give yourself the right to be honestly vulnerable, because that is the first step on the path of real healing. I know there were times you told yourself, I have to be stronger. I mustn't let anyone see my tears. You fear that if you cry, others will think you're weak, fragile, unable to cope. You think grit means being hard-hiding every time your heart bleeds behind a calm smile. But listen, tears are not a sign of failure. They are the soul's call, the body's way of saying I'm hurting. I need healing. Just as a skin wound must be cleaned before it's bandaged, a heart wound must be seen before it can recover. We've grown too used to running from feelings. When sadness knocks, we turn the music up. When loneliness slips in, we bury ourselves in work, social media, or loud gatherings. When the heart quietly bleeds, we put on a forced smile. We call it grit maturity, getting over it. But in truth, it's loneliness in disguise. When we strain ourselves to get over it, we don't overcome anything, we just bury it deeper, push it into the basement of the mind where light doesn't reach. And what's buried doesn't vanish. It lies there smoldering, waiting for some war drum, a sound, a scent, a passing glance to erupt like a storm. That's why you can be living peacefully and suddenly break down over something small, not because you're weak, but because the old pain never healed. It was only asleep. So don't treat tears as the enemy. Don't treat emotions as obstacles. See them as children forgotten in the dark. They don't need to be driven away. They need you to come back. Hold them and say, I see you. I will listen. That isn't weakness. That is real courage. Have you ever heard your heart beat a war drum? Not out there, but inside your chest. There are nights that seem quiet. No cars, no voices yet. Your heart races. Your hands go cold. Your breath turns rapid, and your mind starts replaying old images like a damaged film. Words that once hurt. You faces that turned away, moments you thought you'd forgotten, but that still bleed in silence. You don't know why nothing right now is threatening you, and no one sees the storm within you. Only you know you're breaking into pieces. Those are the drumbeats of the past. They aren't as loud as bombs, but they still awaken old fears, parts of you that once hurt so much you had to hide them to go on. Those drum beats don't come to punish you. They come to remind you a part of you is still left behind on the old battlefield. That part is crouched alone amid the ruins, and it doesn't need you to forget. It needs you to return, hold it, and bring it home. Only then will the past truly close and your heart stop jolting at a drum in the night. Healing is not forgetting. Healing is daring to look straight at the wound, no longer fleeing it like a wild beast. The old soldier finally did that. After years of running, he quietly sought out a Zen master on a hilltop where the air was so still you could hear the wind touch the leaves. He sat, his calloused hand trembling, and spoke. He spoke of nights jerking awake, cold sweat soaking his shirt. He spoke of each time the village drum sounded, his heart clenched, breath-broken mind going dark as if back on the old field. The master didn't interrupt, didn't rush to advise. He simply listened like a night watchman listening to a stream. When the story ended, he said slowly, "The drum doesn't hurt you. What hurts you is the memory you haven't been willing to hold." Those words were a light touch that woke a whole dark region in the soldier's heart. He understood all this time he hadn't overcome the past. He'd been fleeing it, and the more he ran, the closer it chased. From that day when the village beat the drum, he no longer locked the door and hid in the dark. He opened the window, sat on the old wooden chair, closed his eyes, and let the drum pass through him like a wind not dodging, not resisting. At first, he cried. Each beat brought a memory. Faces of fallen friends, screams, the stink of gun smoke, freezing nights where only he remained alive, but he didn't drive them away anymore. He sat still and held them all, as if embracing old friends one last time. Then one day, when the drum sounded, he didn't cry. He only breathed out long and slow light, as setting down a sack of stones carried too long. And in that moment, he knew the war in his heart had finally ended. You can do that for yourself without waiting for someone to rescue you. Try sitting down, breathing deeply, and naming the wound in your heart. Not to dwell on pain, but to look at it for the first time with gentleness. Don't ask when will it stop hurting, because that only adds pressure and makes you feel slow to recover. Ask instead, can I be gentler with myself? Because the truth is, pain doesn't disappear on its own. With time, it eases when you stop treating yourself like a warrior and start treating yourself like someone who needs holding. You don't have to be strong right away. You don't need to pretend you're okay or force a smile to reassure others. You only need to be honest that you're hurting, because acknowledgement is the first step toward healing. Wounds are not a period. They are reminders that a part of you was hurt and now needs you to return. Gather it up and care for it. Only when you begin to heal are you truly free to walk without the past on your back, free to breathe without fearing the war drums in your chest will suddenly sound free to live as yourself without straining to be strong. True strength isn't fearlessness, it's daring to face fear. Courage doesn't mean a heart that doesn't tremble, it means you keep walking even while it does. Strength isn't never falling, it's standing up, even while still shaking and bleeding. The strongest aren't those who never stumble, but those who collapsed on the road and still quietly got up, brushed the dust from their knees, and went on even when every step hurt like tearing. Strength also isn't needing no one, it's daring to open yourself to help. This society often makes you think needing someone is weakness, but in truth, trusting is a rare kind of courage. To reach out a hand in the dark You must overcome fear of rejection, overcome the ego that wants to prove I'm fine. You don't have to walk alone through the dark nights. You don't have to hide the silent battles raging in your mind. You don't have to pretend to be calm when inside you're torn. You are not alone. Many people hear their own drum beats, old memories still sounding in the heart, and they too are learning to set down the backpack of the past, to keep living lighter, slower, but more truly themselves. Because strength isn't in never falling, but in taking the next step even when your legs still shake. The old soldier finally found peace, not because the war never happened, but because he no longer let the war keep happening inside him. He couldn't erase the past, but he stopped letting it control the present, and that is the true victory. You can do the same. You don't have to wipe away everything that once hurt or pretend you never fell. You only need to decide not to let old wounds keep writing your present story. The past is a chapter already inked, but the present is still a blank page waiting for your pen. The war drums in you, the midnight jolts, the nameless worries, the sudden panic. They aren't signs you're weak or broken. They are the echoes of a battle you survived, and what they need is not to be chased away, but to be held, looked at, and told, we survived. Now, we get to live on. When you dare to sit with the hurt part of you instead of running or pushing it down, it will stop screaming to be seen. And when the old drum becomes just a sound, no longer an alarm bell, you'll know you haven't only survived. You are truly living. There are kinds of pain that can't be named. They're not loud, they don't bleed, they don't scream yet. They quietly gnaw at a person's heart day after day. It's the kind of loss that makes the world fall frighteningly silent, as if all sound vanished along with one person. I want to tell you a story about a father who lost his only child, about a room left empty for years that no one dared to enter, and about the quiet journey in which he learned to turn pain into love so he could keep living. That day when the accident happened, it was late winter. A cutting wind knifed through the bare trees, sweeping down the long street like a thin blade. The sky sank into the gray of cold ash. The father came home with empty hands, so empty they felt like they no longer belonged to him. On the porch, the wind chime trembled softly, sounding as fragile as a breath left unfinished. His son, once his whole sky, now existed only in a photo hanging crooked on the wall. The picture was taken on a sunny morning when the boy held up a small trophy, smiling until his eyes squinted. From that day on, light seemed to forget the way back to this house. The boy's room remained exactly as it had been on the morning of the accident. The bedding unmade the dent from his head still pressed into the pillow. A book left open with a bus ticket marking the page. A dried-out pen lying across the margin. A pair of sneakers placed neatly by the door as if their owner had just run out for a minute and might return any time. On the desk, half an apple had shriveled, leaving a thin brown ring like a forgotten ring someone left behind. The smell of peeled orange lingered in the air, fading with each passing season. But that owner never came back. Every day, the father sat in front of the bedroom door, not going in, not speaking, not crying, just sitting, quiet as a breathing statue. His whole body seemed curled around the wooden chair. His hands rested on his knees, fingers interlaced and white at the knuckles. On some afternoons, the sun slanted through the window. A strip of light slid to the tip of his shoe. then quietly withdrew, and he still sat there, unmoving. Year after year, spring came and went, and the bedroom door stayed closed. Sometimes an old friend would stop by, sit in the living room, make small talk, pour him a cup of tea, open their mouth to ask something, then fall silent. They were afraid of accidentally pulling the wound out from under the thin scab he had worked so hard to build. They left with a self-comforting promise: time will ease everything. But time only passed like a draft slipping through a crack, cold, touching no one. He kept living, but not truly alive. He ate so as not to die, worked so he wouldn't be called a failure, smiled so no one would ask pitying questions. His laughter was paper thin, placed on his lips and falling to the floor without an echo. Each morning he folded the blanket, made coffee, and walked to work along a route he knew by heart. Each night he returned, set his keys down softly on the shelf, as if afraid of waking someone, then sat in the chair by his child's door, back slightly bent, eyes fixed on the doorknob, polished smooth by countless times he had touched it without daring to turn it. In the house, everything went on as if one more person still lived there. He still bought the cereal his child liked, still set his child's chopsticks on the table, still stuck a small candle in a cake on the birthday, lit it, and blew it out alone. On the roof, sparrows built a new nest now and then, fluttering down to the child's windowsill to carry off a few weightless bits of dust. He watched them, and his chest tightened for no reason, as if every speck of dust that lifted away was a fragment of memory being stripped from his hands. The neighbors said he had aged quickly. His hair went white in a single rainy season. His back bent as if each day he had to carry one more invisible stone. The security guard at the gate said that many nights at cockcrow, the father's light was still on his shadow, long on the wall, flickering like a flame about to go out. Sometimes he stood right at the bedroom door, hand on the knob, taking a deep breath. With a slight twist, the door would open, but he stopped, let his hand fall, and stepped back. He was afraid that if he opened it, he would see everything, and seeing would force him to admit that the person who had to walk into that room was no longer father and son, but only him alone. That frightened him more than death. Once, a storm blew through. The wind ripped the curtains, rain lashed down the child's window, flew open, and water soaked the book's edge. He ran to the doorway and stood there on the threshold. All he had to do was step inside to pull the window shut, cover the desk with a cloth, and dry the pages. But he froze at the sill, as if an invisible rope bound his ankles. He reached out into the gap, touched the desk's edge, then withdrew. In the end, he turned away to find a dry cloth. And because the wind happened to shift, the window slammed against the frame and shut, leaving a damp, rainy smell in the room that lingered a long time. At work, he spoke little, arrived on time, and was meticulous to a fault. New co-workers knew him as strict and reserved. Old co-workers knew he had once been the best storyteller in the office, cracking jokes every noon. All of that stopped on that day. Over time, people grew used to his silence, the way they're used to. A wall clock, it still runs, still keeps time, but no one pays attention. On cold winter days, his breath turned to steam before his face. He sat there counting breaths like counting the invisible footsteps of someone walking farther down a road with no turning back. The cold seeped into his bones, but another cold never melted the cold in the center of his chest, where a father's hearth should have been. Once his child's former teacher brought a box saying it held a few unfinished drawings from art class. He didn't take it. He said to leave it by the door. That night, he opened the box and looked at the unfinished strokes, a tree with no crown, yet a road with no destination drawn. He closed the lid very gently, set the box on the top shelf beside the crooked photo frame, and sat back down, hand to forehead, eyes squeezed shut. Time flowed like the river at the bank. Each season, the water changed color and kept on moving. Inside the house, everything stood still. The father was like an empty shell holding the soul that had gone off with his child. Outside, flowers bloomed and fell, birds nested and flew, children grew up and left for school far away. Inside, the clock ticked, but the minute hand seemed reluctant each time it passed, the number 2 tied to that date. One morning, when dew still clung to the roof tiles, he heard a late rooster crow. He suddenly noticed the wooden chair had sunk into the shape of his body. Perhaps a part of him had become permanently stuck here right before this door. He set his hand on the knob once more. Cold, cold like metal touching snow. He kept his hand there longer than usual. Behind the door, dust must have settled in a thin layer on the pages. He imagined the smell of his child's clothes, the sweat after running the shampoo lingering in the towel. Everything was as sweet as it was merciless. He let go, sat again. On the wall, the photo tilted a little more because the nail had loosened. He didn't get up to straighten it. Maybe inside him everything had been tilted for a long time. The father kept living, or rather, kept existing. He moved through his days as if in fog. He learned to answer small talk, to smile politely enough to say, "I'm fine," without his voice shaking. But deep inside in his chest, there was only a hollow where the call Dad had once echoed. Sometimes that emptiness sent up a sound already gone, startling him awake at night, sitting bolt upright, staring into the dark until dawn tiptoed in. Someone told him, "Time will heal." He nodded, not arguing. But he knew that for people who have set their hearts on the threshold of a room with no owner, time is only a passerby closing a drafty door, not one who can open the door of the heart. And somehow, he kept sitting like a breathing statue, waiting for something that could not come back. Can you imagine? When someone loses their parents, they're called an orphan. When someone loses a spouse, they're called a widow or widower. But when someone loses a child, there isn't a word for it, because that pain lies beyond the forms of language, beyond what humans can express. There is no word, because no one wants to believe it can happen. There is no word, because every syllable is too small in the face of the vast emptiness a child leaves when they vanish from their parents' lives. That father didn't know what to call himself either. He only knew that each time he heard children laughing in the yard, his heart clenched as if squeezed by an invisible hand. Laughter is the sound of life. Yet now it felt like tiny needles piercing the rotten fabric of his memories. Each time he saw a father leading a child across the street, he had to turn away, afraid someone would catch his shattered gaze. Because in that split second, everything he'd tried to bury surged up like a flood, the small hand that once gripped his, the bright voice calling Dad, the warmth that once slipped into his cold palm each winter. Outsiders might think many years have passed and the wound should have healed. But the truth is, some wounds never heal. They quietly become part of the body and ache whenever they brush against memory. And because there's no word for it, he carried the pain in silence like a secret name only his heart could hear. Then one day, he met an old Zen master who lived in a small temple at the end of the village. The temple nestled among bamboo groves, moss soft on the roof tiles, a light swirl of incense drifting like a thin thread of memory. The father sat on the cold step. His eyes were sunken, his voice hoarse like wind through a bamboo tube. Why did my child have to die? Why? Am I still alive? That question dumped out the weight of years of muteness. It was the choked cry of a heart left behind at a child's grave. The Zen master looked at him for a long time. In his gentle eyes, there was no pity, only a quiet understanding, like a deep lake reflecting everything without a ripple. Then he said softly, like wind, "Your child is not lost because he died. He only dissolved into everything that remains like a candle that goes out, doesn't vanish, but becomes the light shining on the face of the father who misses his child." The father went still. In that moment, he realized his child was not lying in that room, nor buried deep in the earth. His child was in each ray of sun slipping through the window every morning, in the breeze drifting across the yard, in the very breath moving in and out of his chest. And then he cried. The tears burst like breaking the stone that had encased his heart for so long. His sobs were no longer the ragged cries of pain, but the breath of a heart living again for the first time, even with the crack of loss still in it. He cried, as if for the first time in many years, he dared to believe he still had a child, only in another form. The pain of loss didn't disappear, but it could transform from sorrow into love. You don't need to erase memories, nor force yourself to forget the one who's gone. You only need to stop living as if a part of you died with them. Because when you keep living, not barely surviving, but truly living, you are keeping them with you in the deepest way. Every kind act you do today, every smile you give, every breath you live fully, is a way for that person to go on existing in you. That isn't betraying the past. It's giving old love a new form, lighter, warmer, able to walk forward with you. That father began to open the old room's door, the door that had been a tomb sealing up his heart. He gently wiped the thick dust from the books his child had read, folded the bedding that still held the familiar shape, and set a small vase of flowers by the window so that each morning the sunlight could pour a little life into it. Not to erase his child's presence, but to give that love a new shape, gentler, more alive. Instead of trying to keep everything exactly as it was the day his child left, he chose to let that love keep growing along with himself. He started volunteering in the village, teaching orphaned children whose eyes once looked as empty as his had. Each time he bent to tie a shoelace, his hands still trembled, but now with tenderness, not with pain. Because he understood, healing isn't forgetting it's going on. With love, love doesn't erase loss, but it keeps loss from becoming a pit that swallows your life. And in that way, he didn't just keep his child in memory. He let his child keep living in every small good thing he sowed in the world. Maybe you've also lost someone. And maybe, like that father, you still go through each day, you still work, still eat, still talk to people, but deep inside there's only a gaping emptiness nothing can fill. You smile so others won't worry. Keep busy so you won't remember. But at night a familiar scent, an old melody, is enough to make your heart cave in. I want to tell you this. You're not betraying the one who's gone if you choose to go on living. On the contrary, it's what they most hoped for, to see you at peace. They loved you, and real love never wants the beloved to stay in darkness. No one leaves wishing to leave you a broken life. They hope to leave you a reason to take the next step. You can't change the fact that they're gone, but you can change how you carry them in your heart, not as a wound that won't stop bleeding, but as a quiet lamp lighting the road you walk. So each step you take proves that love still lives, not in tears, but in every breath you fully live today. People often say, time heals. But the truth is, time doesn't heal on its own. If you just sit and wait, time won't pull you out of pain. It only pulls you farther from the life that's happening. It's how you live in that time that heals. You can use time to run away, to lock yourself in the empty room of the past where the same memories loop like an old film, no matter where you rewind, showing only loss. Or you can use that same time to open the door, let in the light, and plant a new seed right where things once collapsed. Because pain doesn't have to be erased. It needs to be turned into nourishment for better things to grow. Loss can teach us to cherish those who remain. And if you still have someone with you today, don't wait until they're gone to begin regretting. Look at them deeply, as if at a fragile, irreplaceable gift. Hold them long as if you were holding a small world trembling in your hands. And say the loving things you once held back, because every day you have love is a day not to waste. Now each morning that father still walks into his child's room, but he no longer sits there mute like a lifeless statue. He throws open the window to let sunlight rush in, spreading warm gold over every old thing. Then he smiles, a light smile, not loud as if greeting someone still somewhere nearby. Not because he has forgotten, not because the longing is gone, but because he has learned to love without clinging. Instead of imprisoning himself in the past, he lets that love be the force that keeps him alive, no longer a chain binding him to a day that's gone. He no longer demands that time return what he lost. He chooses to give love to what remains because he understands pain doesn't make love deeper. Only living fully can do that. And each day with his own peaceful breaths, he lets his child go on living, not in tears, but in sunlight and laughter, and in the kindness he plants in the world. Grief is real. Loss is real. No one can deny the cold emptiness left by a loved one's departure. But something else is just as real, love. And that love does not vanish with death. The one you love is still here even if you can't see their face or hear their voice. They are present in every beat of your heart, in the way you are gentler to a child, in each quiet kindness you do, and in every time you hold someone a little longer, because you know what loss is. This is the deepest way to keep them, not by weeping forever at a grave, but by living on living fully, living for their share too. Because when you bravely take the next step, you're not leaving them. You're giving their love a chance to keep living through your life. In today's society, from a very young age, we're taught that our worth lies in numbers. Scores, rankings, certificates seem to become the yardstick for an entire life. So just one failure, one low grade, one time not being called by name can make a child feel useless. I want to tell you an old Zen story about a student who was once seen as a failure and then became a renowned teacher respected for a lifetime. A story that reminds us true worth isn't in numbers, but in how we don't give up. Back then, in a small village nestled against a mountain slope, there was a thin student named Jun. Jun wasn't like the other kids in class. While his classmates recited ancient classics, fluently reading aloud and writing swiftly, Jun was still sounding out each word, as if every word were a mountain he had to climb. When his classmates finished a whole page of math in a flash, June was still erasing and rewriting tangled numbers, his face flushed and his hands shaking with nerves. Each time the teacher passed June's desk, he'd sigh softly, and the other kids would turn to whisper and giggle behind June's back. When June's parents looked at his grade report full of red marks, they could only sigh and quietly turn away. No one said anything, but Jun understood in their eyes he was a small disappointment. Jun gradually became a shadow in the classroom. He always chose the back row, head down, hand covering part of his notebook, as if afraid someone would see the word incompetent etched into each letter he wrote. His eyes no longer shone with the eagerness he'd had on the first days of school. Only one thing remained, a heaviness like stone that clung to him every day. Then one day, when the math tests were handed back, Jun stared at the bright red numbers on the page like blood, and his throat tightened. He waited for the class to bustle with putting away notebooks, then quietly stood up in the middle of the period without a word. Jun ran straight out of the room, leaving behind looks that were half pity, half contempt. He just ran and ran across the windy fields, along the winding dirt path, up the hill behind the village. Only when he couldn't breathe anymore did Jun stop under an old pine. The cicadas droned as if to mock him. He collapsed to the ground, clutching his notebook, tears blurring the crooked lines of writing. "Maybe I was born a failure," Jun whispered. "Maybe I should stop." At that moment, a voice light as wind sounded behind him. "Why are you crying?" Jun started and turned around. An old Zen master with hair white as clouds and eyes gentle as an autumn lake was standing beside the pine. He lived in a small hermitage on the hilltop and rarely came down to the village. Jun hurriedly wiped his tears, his voice trembling. "Because I'm not good like everyone else. No matter how hard I try, I always lose to them." The master didn't answer. He quietly sat down beside him. He picked up a small stone, set it on the ground in front of Jun, and smiled. "This stone has lain here for hundreds of years. It has never bloomed, never borne fruit. But thanks to it, the wind changes direction, water shifts its course, and trees can grip their roots. So tell me, do you think it's useless?" Jun looked up, bewildered. For the first time, someone didn't call him slow or useless. Instead, they asked him a question like that. The master placed a hand on Jun's shoulder, his voice slow and clear. "Numbers don't define a person. Only perseverance defines the journey." Then he stood and slowly walked back toward the hermitage, leaving Jun sitting quietly under the pine, the words ringing in his head like a bell tolling through the sweltering noon. From that day, Jun no longer tried to be the best in class. He stopped comparing himself to his classmates' pristine notebooks or their dazzling 9s and 10s. Jun quietly persisted in his own way each day, learning one more line, solving one more problem, writing one more short passage. He didn't have to be the best in class. He only needed to be a little better than yesterday. Day after day, while his classmates chased competition, Jun steadily built his own foundation. No one noticed, but his letters gradually lined up straighter, his numbers grew less wobbly, and in his eyes, a small flame began to kindle, not the fire of envy, but the gentle light of belief. The years flowed by like a murmuring stream. From the student once called bottom of the class, Jun became the best in school. Then he passed the entrance exam to the region's most prestigious school, kept studying, and kept persevering day by day, just like when he sat under the pine. Many years later, when Jun had become a famous teacher, someone asked him the secret to his success. Jun only smiled his eyes as gentle as ever. I'm not smarter than anyone. I just don't give up. And perhaps that's what made Jun not only more skilled, but also live more deeply and steadily, like that old pine roots driven deep into the earth, standing calm no matter how hard the wind blew. Have you ever been like Jun? Have you ever looked at a low grade and felt as if the whole world were judging you? Failed an exam, an interview, a project, and then whispered to yourself, maybe I'm not good enough. Let comparisons, pitying looks, or criticism make you believe your worth is as small as the red numbers on a page. If so, I want you to pause and take a deep breath. Because failure doesn't define a person. Failure is just a thin page, not your whole book. One rough chapter doesn't mean the entire story is bad. Your true worth isn't in grades, diplomas, or trophies you bring home to display. All of those can be lost, but grit and perseverance cannot. Those are the core of who you are. What matters isn't how many times you've stumbled, but whether you'll stand up one more time. What defines you isn't your speed, but whether you keep walking, even when the road is rough, empty, and no one is clapping. Don't let society make you believe your value must be measured by achievements. Achievements are the finish line of a moment. Worth is the journey of a lifetime. And on that journey, the only thing you need to carry isn't a perfect resume. It's a heart that won't give up. You don't need to be better than anyone else. You only need to keep moving forward one step at a time, no matter how small. Because every step, even slow, keeps writing your story, a story that can't be decided by a single stumble. Modern life buzzes with rankings, medals, awards, and glittering performance numbers. Social media is filled with images of people who succeeded very early, outperformed, everyone achieved the extraordinary. And it's easy to start believing that to have worth, you must be better than others, top of the class, ahead of your coworkers, standing out to be recognized. But the truth is, you don't need to be better than anyone. You only need to be better than yourself yesterday. A person's true worth isn't in where you stand, but in the direction you're headed. You don't need to be top of the class, only someone who never stops learning. You don't need to win everything, only to not give up on your own dream, even when the path sometimes has only you still walking it. Achievements, however brilliant, are only temporary markers, not destinations. Today, you might stand on a podium. Tomorrow, you might start again from the beginning. Achievements are like flags planted along the way to show where you've been, not where you should stop. But the joy of learning, that is the real journey. When you learn, you grow bit by bit. When you make daily effort, you're building an inner strength no one can take away. That's what creates deep confidence, not from others' eyes, but from within. So don't compare yourself to anyone. Compare yourself only to yesterday. As long as you're moving forward, even slowly, even quietly, you're going the right way. And on that road, your worth isn't measured by position, but by perseverance and the courage not to quit. Do you still feel afraid of the word failure? So much that every time you take a test, your heart pounds, not with excitement to see what you understand, but with worry that you'll drop in rank, be compared, be called incompetent. Have you forgotten the joy of learning? Because you're too focused on having enough points, being good enough, being better than someone to be recognized. If so, I want you to stop and take a deep breath. Then ask yourself a very simple but honest question. Do I study because I love this? or just because I'm afraid of being called a failure. If you study only to avoid losing, avoid falling behind, avoid criticism, then every step will feel heavy, like you're running away. You'll never truly learn because your mind will always be on defense, afraid to be wrong, afraid to try, afraid to open to the new. And someone who's always afraid of being wrong will never truly be good. But if you learn out of love, curiosity, a desire to understand more deeply, to grow every day, then every lesson, even hard ones, even with low scores, is still a victory. Because victory isn't beating others, it's overcoming fear within yourself. When you no longer learn out of fear of losing, you can learn for the joy of discovery. And that's when you truly win, day by day, bit by bit. Achievements are only temporary. They're like fireworks, dazzling, brilliant, making the whole sky look up, and gone in a moment. But a lifelong learning mindset is a steady flame quietly burning through the years, lighting your path even when no one applauds. Remember, the greatest successes were once failing students. Before they were praised, they were doubted, mocked, even pushed aside. The best teachers weren't born excellent. They were once the ignored students, sitting quietly in the back row with eyes full of doubt about themselves. But they didn't stop at failure. They used failure as a foundation pain, as motivation each fall, as a lesson in standing up stronger. And those once labeled without a future became living proof that true worth isn't in the starting point, but in perseverance that doesn't retreat. The most mature person isn't the one who's never fallen, but the one who each time they fall stands up with a heart still warm, still daring to love what they do and believe in the path they chose. So don't be obsessed with fleeting achievements. Cultivate a long-term learning mindset, because that is the only baggage that will walk with you to the end when all report cards, titles, and applause have faded into the past. On the day Jun returned to his old school for the opening ceremony, the early autumn wind blew through the flame trees, yellow leaves drifting across the yard, and the drums sounded as lively as ever. The boy who once curled up in a corner now stood on the stage before hundreds of eager eyes looking up. Jun looked at those young faces, paused for a moment, as if finding his former self, then smiled, his voice warm and firm. I used to be at the bottom of the class, but because of that, I learned the most important thing. Don't let a tiny number define a great soul. The hall fell silent, because Jun wasn't just talking about himself. He was speaking for all the hearts once labeled inferior because of a few low scores. Jun reminded them that a number is just a moment, not a whole life. Grades can reflect how well you did on a test, but they can't measure perseverance, kindness, or the burning dreams within you. Then Jun concluded, eyes bright. If you're at the bottom, don't be afraid. You don't need to be top of the class. You only need not to give up on yourself. Because true worth isn't in where you stand, but in how you keep walking day by day, bit by bit, without stopping. Applause rose long and thunderous, like a confirmation that great souls are never limited by small numbers. You are the same. You are not your past grades, not the times your test was crossed out, not others' doubtful looks. You are the perseverance that hasn't gone out, the quiet will no number can count. You are the sleepless nights no one saw, just you, a desk lamp flickering and pages stained with ink. You are the times you collapsed and quietly stood up again, knees still scraped, heart still trembling. You are the small steps no one claps for, yet you keep taking them day after day in silence, with a fragile but persistent faith. Because a person's true worth isn't in how quickly they achieve something, but in whether they stop when they haven't achieved it yet. And if today you feel inferior, pause and take a deep breath. You haven't lost if you haven't quit. Losing isn't finishing late, it's stopping while the journey still remains. And you are still walking. And that alone is a victory. In modern life, we often only tidy up and take care of things when someone will see them. The house gets cleaned only when guests are coming. Clothes are put in order only when someone might notice. And the mind only gets care when it's so tangled we can't bear it anymore. But I want to tell you an old story about a Zen master who lived alone in an old empty room with no one coming by. Yet every day he swept it as if preparing to welcome an honored guest. On the northern slope of a mountain where clouds often draped across rooftops like white silk ribbons, there was an ancient temple nearly forgotten by time. Tiles had flaked off, exposing beams darkened and decayed like ash. The walls were cracked, mottled with green moss, as if they too were panting from carrying too many years. Along the stone path up to the gate, weeds grew thick, hiding steps, worn smooth by the feet of those long ago. People said no one lived there anymore, except a Zen master past 70. He lived alone. No students, no pilgrims, no bustling ceremonies, only the wind slipping through wooden gaps, the soft thuds of pine needles on the roof, and his own steady breath each dawn. His single room lay deep in the rear hall. The roof had sagged. Broken tiles let specks of sunlight sift in like golden dust drifting in the air. The walls were lined with age like old skin. The wooden door was riddled by termites, the hinges letting out dry, creaking groans whenever the wind blew hard. Inside were only a small wooden table, an old teapot, a dusty bookshelf, and a mat laid right on the cold stone floor. And still, every day before the light had fully risen, while the valley was heavy with mist, the Zen master quietly woke. He slowly retied his frayed robe, then took up the bamboo broom by the door. Before light entered the room, the broom was already whispering rhythmically across the stone. He swept up each little tuft of dust, gathering it carefully, as if he were gathering the excesses in his own heart. After that, he wiped each doorsill, polished the panes of the weather-dulled windows, and arranged the old objects neatly, as if they were treasures. Each time he set a book back in place, he gently brushed off the dust and bowed his head, his eyes soft as a passing breeze. No motion was hurried, no sound unnecessary, only a focused quiet, as if he were in conversation with each mote of dust, each crack in the wall. Once a traveler happened by. He stood at the door, astonished to see the old Zen master carefully wiping a window frame. In a room almost no one entered, each stone seemed newly burnished. Each object, though old, was strangely orderly. The traveler asked with a hint of surprise, "You live alone, and no one comes into this room. Why do you bother cleaning it every day?" The Zen master looked up, smiling gently, like early winter sun. He set the cloth down and answered slowly, "Because I always prepare as if an honored guest were about to arrive." The traveler frowned, but no one comes. The master looked out the window where dewdrops were melting on pine branches and spoke softly as if to himself. And also because my mind cannot be clear if I live amid clutter, even if no one sees it. The traveler stood silent for a long time. He suddenly realized that although the room was dilapidated, it had a strange beauty, not from the objects inside, but from the gentle care soaked into every corner. As if with each morning's sweeping, the master wasn't just cleaning the room. He was wiping away the quiet dust that clung to his own heart. On the path down from the temple, as the mountain wind tossed golden leaves around his feet, the traveler still heard the master's words echoing within. The mind cannot be clear in clutter, even if no one sees it, and he understood. Perhaps that was exactly why the shabby room glowed like a lamp amid ruin. Have you ever let your mind become as messy as an old room, full of worries, not yet untangled regrets, not yet forgiven half-finished plans? Then you tell yourself, when I'm motivated, I'll clean it up. But day after day, the motivation never comes. Because the truth is, motivation never comes first. It only comes after you begin. No one waits for inspiration before picking up the broom. They pick up the broom first, and inspiration follows after the first few strokes. That Zen master didn't clean the room to show off to anyone, nor to prove anything. He did it simply because he understood outer order is the mirror of inner stillness. Have you noticed? When your room is messy, your mind is messy too. Step into a space piled with clothes, scattered papers, unwashed dishes. Your breath grows heavier, your pace quickens, and your focus slips. But when the space is clean and bright, each item in its place, you feel a few kilos of worry lift off. The mind is the same. If you don't sweep it daily, sadness, disappointment, envy, shame quietly accumulate like an invisible dust. At first, they're just tiny particles, but gradually, they thicken into a film that keeps you from seeing joy clearly, from even hearing your own laughter. Then you think you've lost motivation, when in fact, you're simply living in a mental room so dusty, there's no space left for light. That's why you must begin, not wait for motivation to begin, but begin to create motivation. Like the master each morning, not waiting for a knock at the door before he sweeps. Just start with something small, write down what's weighing on you, then tear it up. Sit quietly for 5 minutes, breathe slowly, and listen to yourself. Tidy your desk, fold a few clothes, light a stick of incense. These are the first dusting motions, gentle, but enough to clear your mind a little and let the light begin to slip in. Because in the end, like any room, if you don't sweep it yourself, no one can make it clean for you. Today's world often teaches that you should only strive when you have a specific goal and only prepare when the opportunity is right at hand. But real life doesn't work that way. Big opportunities don't knock ahead of time or send a letter with date and hour. They usually arrive when you think nothing is coming, when you are quietly working in obscurity with no one watching. So preparing well every day, even without results yet, isn't naive, it's wise. What you train today may be exactly what lets you catch tomorrow. Just as a climber doesn't wait to see the peak before practicing steps, you can't wait for opportunity to start preparing. If you wait until the opportunity is obvious, it may find you still unready to take it. The Zen master didn't know when a guest might visit, but each morning he swept as a ritual, not for guests, but for himself. Because he understood preparation isn't an act for the future. It's how we live fully in the present. With each sweep, he reminded his mind, even if nothing happens today, I still live worthily. And that is what makes the difference. It's not opportunity that makes a person extraordinary, but the daily habit of preparation that makes them steady enough not to miss opportunity when it suddenly arrives. Are you living that way? waiting until it's necessary to take care of yourself, to learn to practice, to change. Waiting for a big interview, an important person, or a prestigious opening to knock. Before you live more intentionally, before you tidy a heart that's been cluttered for too long. If so, you're living as if your worth depends on others' eyes. But the truth is, your value isn't in who's watching you. It's in whether you respect yourself. You don't need an audience to live well. You don't need a visitor to sweep the room of your heart. If you only live well, when someone's watching, you're performing, not living. When you quietly tend the small details of your life, even when no one knows, that is real self-respect. Remember, you deserve to live well, not to prove anything to anyone but for yourself. And those who respect themselves don't wait for a special occasion to be decent. They make every day an occasion worthy of care. There's an overlooked truth when a room is clean. We don't just feel better. We think more clearly. It's no accident that after tidying the house, folding clothes, wiping down your desk, your mind feels lighter and clearer. Outer order always reflects inner order. The mind is a room too. If it's orderly, you can find ideas, solutions, and opportunities. But if it's packed with anxiety, regret, comparison, jealousy, then even if opportunity knocks, you won't notice because the noise in your head drowns everything out. Like sunlight shining into a dusty room, it doesn't brighten the room. It just sends up a storm of dust so you can't see anything. Opportunities are the same. They don't flourish in chaos. They sprout only in stillness. So before you wait for good things to arrive, clean your own mind. Write down what weighs you down. Forgive what is past. Fold up old worries like out-of-season clothes and put them in the drawer of the past. When your mind is tidy, the light of opportunity can shine in, and this time you'll see it clearly. Maybe it's time to gently ask yourself, what in your heart needs sweeping? A lingering anger that flares when remembered, a grievance never forgiven, or a half-done plan you keep promising yourself you'll do later. These are the fine dust coating every corner of your mental room. The longer you leave them, the thicker they settle, making it hard for any new thought, any new joy to take root. So start clearing a little at a time. It doesn't have to be spotless now. You don't have to change everything in a day. Just brush away one layer of dust each day with one small, sincere action. Maybe it's forgiving something old. Maybe it's finishing a task you've hesitated over. Maybe it's simply sitting quietly for 5 minutes, breathing deeply, listening to yourself. Lasting change has never come from sudden flashy breakthroughs, but from very small steps repeated with gentle perseverance every day. Like sweeping a room not for anyone to see, but so your heart can feel a little lighter each day. People often measure a life by what someone has money in the account, a title on the card, the house they own. Society uses outcomes as the sole measure of success. But the inner life has taught me the opposite attitude matters more than circumstances. You can live in an old room with cracked walls, a leaky roof, nothing of value, and still each morning fold your blanket, neatly open the window to the sun, sweep away the dust, brew a pot of tea, and smile to yourself. Then your heart shines like jade, and that room, though old, becomes a peaceful place. Conversely, you might live in a grand house full of luxury, yet wake each day with a gloomy, irritable, resentful, envious heart. And then that very palace is only a quiet hell. Attitude is the root. Circumstances are branches and leaves. If you tend only the leaves and neglect the root, they wither no matter how much you water. But if the root is strong and at peace, the tree flowers even in storms. That Zen master understood this well. He didn't wait for the ruined room to be renovated before living well. He chose to live well first, and his calm discipline and respect for every small thing gradually changed his life. That is the sustainable path. Don't wait for the world to change. Before you live joyfully first, and the world around you slowly changes. Outside, the world is always noisy and urgent, like a rushing river that won't let us stop. People race toward big goals, a new house, a higher position, more money. We're swept along thinking only big leaps can change our lives. But in truth, the quiet, very small steps we take each day shape our entire lives. A cluttered inner room won't suddenly grow peaceful because of one big success. It begins to glow when we bother to tidy a little each morning, clear the workspace, fold the blanket after waking, as a reminder we are still alive. Let go of an old complaint that's clung to us for years. Forgive an old mistake, someone else's or our own, so we stop carrying the past like a sack of rocks. Sit down, breathe deeply, so the mind stops spinning like a scorched wheel. Just 5 minutes, not to become a better version, but simply to remember we are living, not just existing like a machine. And then smile, not because anything special happened, but because today is here like an honored guest. Today is a guest who will never return. Each day we live is a once-only opportunity, no repeats, no storage. If we don't live up to today, if we neglect it, chasing a tomorrow that hasn't arrived, we will never truly touch that tomorrow. Because tomorrow isn't a place we go. It's what we create from how we live today. And those who bow each morning to sweep the room of their heart will be light enough to welcome tomorrow with a mind clear and bright. Time is the quietest thing and also the most powerful. It takes away our youth, the once radiant faces around us, and the days that seemed endless. And then one afternoon, as sunlight tilts through the window, you suddenly see an old photograph where the people who once were your whole world are now only blurred outlines. Do you cry, or will you smile? Like the old woman in the story I'm about to tell. At the end of a small street so quiet, you can hear leaves falling. There is an old house with paint peeling from the years. In that house lives an old woman alone. Her hair is white as cotton, so fine a passing breeze can stir it. Her thin hands, dry like winter branches, still slowly do small everyday things, brewing a pot of tea, watering plants, dusting the old wooden table. On that table sits a yellowed picture frame with thin scratches along the wooden edge. The photo inside has faded so much it's hard to make out each face. It's a family portrait taken decades ago, a gentle-eyed husband, little children parents seated beside them, and a few close friends who once stood by her through the bright years of youth. Now, most of them are gone. Some rest in the earth, some live far away in foreign places, some exist only in memory, like stars that once burned bright and then went out in the night sky. The house is so quiet, you can hear the clock ticking. Yet every afternoon when the golden light slips through the window, she pulls up a chair and gently turns the frame toward the light. What surprises anyone who happens to stop by is she doesn't cry. No tears slide down her wrinkled cheeks. Instead, she smiles. A kind, slow smile, light as a breeze moving a leaf. Her eyes don't look at what's been lost. They look at what's present, as if the blurred faces in the photo haven't vanished, only taken on another shape, like the sun at sunset changing color, but still the same sun. In that moment, the house is no longer lonely. It seems to glow with a quiet peace. Anyone who sees that scene feels as if the past, the present, and those who have passed on are gathered around her, sitting with her in the calm of the evening, listening to the wind on the porch. This is not a sad story about an old woman. It's a gentle lesson that some memories aren't there to make us cry, but to remind us to smile. That the past isn't a burden if we learn to look at it with a heart no longer full of regret. And that perhaps the very fading of the photo helps us see the most important thing more clearly. Happiness isn't in holding them back, but in feeling that they are still here in the last rays of the day, in each peaceful breath of a falling afternoon. Have you ever opened an old photo by chance and felt your heart tighten? Every glance, every smile, every face in the picture seems to call from a far-off world, yet feels close enough to touch. Then you realize none of them are sitting beside you anymore, and a lump rises in your throat as if youth had shut its door and would never open it for you again. In moments like that, we often let ourselves slide down the stream of memories. We miss the blazing sunny days, the laughter that's gone, the people who once held us tight, but now are only silhouettes in our minds. We think that regret proves our love, our appreciation. But in truth, regret doesn't bring the past back. It only makes the present fade. You see, when we keep looking back, we miss the sunlight falling on our shoulders right now. We don't hear the birds outside the porch, don't see the gentle eyes of the person still sitting with us. We live in a house full of old pictures, but the windows are shut, and today's light can't get in. The old woman understood something simple, yet deep memories aren't made to hold us in the past, but to help us step forward. Each time she looked at the faded photo, she didn't try to get back what was lost. She simply smiled because such beautiful things once passed through her life. If you keep regretting, you don't just lose the present, you also lose the chance to make new memories. And maybe someday those new memories will be the photo that makes you smile instead of cry. She once said in a voice soft as the day's last breeze, "There was a time when every time I looked at the photo, I cried. I looked at each face, each faded smile, and felt my heart clench. I thought about what was gone, the hugs that aren't there, the voices that dissolved into the wind, the family afternoons now echoing only in my mind. Each tear I shed felt like proof that I still loved them, still remembered." She paused, her gaze drifting far, then settling as calmly as a lake after wind. But one day I realized none of my tears brought them back. They only made me forget that I had once been happy. That sentence left me speechless. Because it's true, we often think pain proves love, that if the hurt stops, it means we've forgotten. But the truth is, the opposite pain shows us what's gone. Gratitude helps us keep what we once had. Regret looks back at the past, as if clutching a wilted flower. The tighter we hold it, the more we feel the thorns. Gratitude looks back like someone admiring a painting. We can smile, whisper thanks, and keep walking. From that day on, she began to smile each time she saw the photo. Not because longing disappeared, but because longing changed shape from a weight on her chest to a gentle light in her heart. She no longer asked, "Why did they leave?" but whispered, "Thank you for having been here." And then I understood happiness doesn't lie in the past. It lies in how we look at the past. You can see it as a loss and hurt forever, or see it as a gift and continue living with gratitude. What is past doesn't need your tears to exist. It only needs your smile to live again in a lighter form in your heart today. We often fear growing old, thinking it's a quiet retreat from the stage of life, a period at the end of youth, health, passion, love, career. We treat the first silver hairs like alarms, the wrinkles like cracks that are taking us away from ourselves. But the truth is, aging doesn't take away your essence. It just pares off the unnecessary ornament, the rivalries, the urge to prove yourself, the anxiety about others' eyes so the deepest part of you can appear. Youth brings experience. Old age brings meaning. Youth lives to explore the world. Old age lives to understand it, and to understand oneself. Youth eagerly asks, "Who will I be?" Old age calmly asks, "What truly matters to me?" And when you see that clearly, you feel light, as if living true to yourself for the first time. The old woman doesn't smile because she forgot the past. She smiles because she understands the past doesn't have to be preserved intact to be precious. Every moment lived, however brief, is still a gift. And the value of a gift isn't in how long you keep it, but in how deeply you cherished it while it was in your hands. Aging isn't loss. It's a journey back to yourself, fuller, deeper, and freer than ever. Try something very small, but it can change how you see your life. Next time you open a drawer and find a faded photo, don't let your heart tighten with the old question. Why did those days go by so fast? Because really, what we regret isn't that time moved quickly, but that we hurried through those days. We fussed over whether we stood out, met the standards, pleased others, and forgot to look deeply into someone's eyes, to sit a few more minutes with the one we love, to breathe in the scent of the afternoon sun, to smile because we got one more day. Instead, try looking at the photo and asking, did I love those days enough? That question isn't to torment you, but to remind you that what gives time meaning isn't the count of years and months, but how deeply you lived each minute. Because when today's days also become old photos, what makes you smile won't be how long they lasted, but whether you were truly there with a whole heart that knows how to love, be grateful, and live. Modern life pushes us forward, always busy, always having to be better than yesterday, always afraid of being left behind. Calendars packed, goals barely reach before we set new ones. It all drives us into a race without a finish line. And then when we suddenly stop and look back, many realize they feel empty because no one stands beside them like before, because the faces in the photos have changed, because they themselves are no longer who they were. But the truth is, you haven't really lost them. You're carrying them with you in a quieter, deeper way. The one who held you in your weekdays now lives in the way you reach out to steady someone else. The one who taught you resilience is present in each choice where you hold to your values. The one who held your hand through storms lives in the way you hold another's hand with all your gentleness. They never disappeared. They transformed into a part of you in how you love, how you live, how you look at life with deeper eyes. That is why you're no longer who you were, but a fuller version, because you carry within you all the love you once received. Aging isn't a period at the end. It's an invitation into a slower, deeper, more complete way of living. Like an ancient tree not competing to bloom as brightly as young green canopies, but with roots sunk deep into the earth, a trunk steady through many storms, and simply by standing still, offering shade to a piece of sky. Modern society often praises youth as the only peak of value, but truly, youth gives us experience while age gives us meaning. After many rounds of gaining and losing, loving and letting go, winning and losing, we stop rushing to prove we're right and simply wish to live true to ourselves. No need to push to the front, because we understand what matters isn't speed, but whether the direction is true to the heart. You don't need to be young again to be happy. You only need to learn to look at what has passed with grateful eyes. Grateful for those who walked with you for a stretch. Grateful even for the wounds that taught you to grow. And grateful to yourself for stepping forward with courage. Then look at what remains beside you with all your gentleness, a slowed sunset, an unrushed conversation, a long, full hug. Happiness isn't in your age. It's in how deeply you choose to live at whatever age you are. Every evening, the old woman still sits by the window, where the last light falls like honey across her silvery hair. Her thin hand veins raised like old roots rests lightly on the yellowed frame. The photo so faded only faint outlines of those faces remain. But she doesn't cry. She smiles a slow, gentle smile, as if each person in the photo is still here, just in a new form. One in the breeze across the porch, one in the familiar scent of tea, one in the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes. Not because she has forgotten. On the contrary, she remembers clearly each laugh, each story, each moment that passed. But instead of holding them with tears, she holds them by living. She still tends each flower pot, still lights the lamp each night, still sends birthday wishes to her children and grandchildren, still sits quietly to listen to sparrows on the sill. She keeps living not just for herself, but as if living the part of those who once loved her and held her hand through youth. And that is why her smile doesn't fade, because it isn't only the smile of someone still alive, but the smile of many lives carried on, in a heart now at peace, free of regret. You can do that too, truly. Let old photos stop being the hidden cuts that ache each time you touch them, and become gentle postcards from the past reminding you that you have loved, laughed, and lived a full life. Don't look at them to regret. Don't let the fading faces pull you back into days that are gone, making you forget the day you're living. Look at them to be grateful for the chance to walk together for a stretch, whether long or short. Grateful for the smiles that once lit your youth, for the hugs that kept you from collapsing, for the eyes that once looked at you as if you were their whole world. Because the past doesn't need you to cry each time you remember. It only needs you to smile when you speak of it as a way of saying thank you to what was, and I will live well for all that remains. There are losses that arrive like a storm. They don't knock, don't give warning. They just crash in and sweep away everything you worked so hard to build. Money, status, reputation. Things you thought were solid as rock suddenly turn to dust. And then you're standing in the wreckage of your life, empty, with nothing left to hold on to. I want to tell you a story about a merchant who once had everything and then lost everything in a shipwreck. But in that moment of having nothing, he found the most precious thing of all, himself. Back then, on the southern coast, there was a man who made the whole marketplace take notice whenever he walked in. People called him the legendary merchant, the one with the largest fleet in the region, warehouses stretching across 3 ports, and a lavish mansion on a hill facing the sea. His ships used to cut through the waves and return from long voyages with holds packed full silks, from the east spices, from the desert gold and silver, from distant mines and gemstones that glittered like captured droplets of sunlight. Whenever his vessels came in, the harbor buzzed. Children ran along the rocky shore, cheering at the sight of his flag fluttering offshore. say his name, and people spoke with admiration tinged with envy, as if speaking of a king without a throne, ruling by numbers and ships that crossed the oceans. He lived in a grand mansion on the hillside, where each meal had dozens of servants standing by. The long table draped in white cloth, crystal chandeliers casting light like fallen stars across the ceiling. Every morning before the sun even rose, the study was already lit. On the desk stacks of contracts, a calendar packed with meetings, multi-million deals to close. Nautical charts were strewn across the floor, telegrams reporting ships arriving, departing, delayed, pouring in like endless rain. He no longer had time to watch the sunrise lift from the sea, the way he'd loved in his youth. He couldn't remember the last time he brewed himself a cup of tea. He could no longer feel the simple joy of sitting with family, hearing a familiar laugh, or just resting quietly together. For him, life was a string of numbers that never stopped ships, that never stayed at port long enough for him to take one deep breath. Then one day, everything stopped, as if the ocean itself got angry, just to remind him who he used to be. His largest ship, the one he called the heart of the entire trade empire, met a violent storm at sea. The storm struck at night. The sky seemed to shatter into 1,000 pieces. Waves rose like black walls that swallowed even the lightning. A final brief telegram from the last sailor ship lost bearings. Water flooding. Forgive us. Then the signal died. By the next morning, the confirmation came. All the precious cargo he'd amassed over decades lay at the bottom of the cold, deep sea. With it went most of his fortune. Everything he had believed was proof of his own worth. Servants resigned one by one, each departure like another, light going out in the sprawling mansion, leaving vast, frightening dark. Partners turned their backs without goodbye. Those who once raised glasses to him now avoided his eyes as if afraid of catching bad luck. People who had praised him as a legend fell silent, as cool and distant as if they'd never known his name. Only he remained alone in an ice-cold mansion, standing among gilded walls that now looked empty wherever he turned. The house that had symbolized success suddenly felt far too large for one solitary person. The ticking clock struck like a hammer on the hollow air. He sat in the dining hall that stretched for yards, a table made for 30, now set with a single plate. The fork's tap against porcelain sounded dry, like wind whistling through the hull of a rotting ship. Night fell. The sea still murmured outside the window like a cold lullaby. But for the first time in decades, there were no contracts to sign, no cargo to tally, no one who needed to say his name. He sat there a long time, looking out at the ocean that had once been his lifeblood, now a vast mirror reflecting the emptiness inside him, and no one knows what he was thinking. Only that night, for the first time in many years, the merchant once revered by the whole coast cried. Can you imagine the feeling that someone emptied your entire life in a single blink? One day you stand at the summit holding power, money, reputation, and the next, you have only 2 empty hands and a house as cold as a cave. The merchant fell into exactly that void where every value he'd clung to crumbled like sand. He wandered the seaside roads like a shadow, his steps heavy as if he carried invisible stones weighing down every muscle. Passers-by recognized him, but no longer stopped to nod in respect. They quietly avoided his gaze, as if his face reminded them too sharply of how fragile all glory is. He didn't know how to live without being the successful man. For years, he'd tied his worth to the numbers in his ledgers, his ships, the voices that praised him. When all of that vanished, he didn't just lose assets. He lost his definition of himself. One evening, exhausted, he sank onto the sand at the old harbor, the place where wind-filled fleets had once set out. The sea stretched endless in front of him, waves beating the shore steadily like the heartbeat of an invisible giant. He sat there, no longer thinking about contracts, no longer counting profit and loss, no longer afraid of falling behind. Only the sea wind on his face, salty like tears, and the sunset reddening the horizon like a ribbon slowly being rolled up. In that moment, for the first time after years of living as if indebted to life, he realized, when you have nothing left to protect you, finally touch freedom. There is no fear of losing, no fear of failing, because there's nothing left to lose. He sat there a long time, breathing deep as if learning to breathe for the first time. No longer the famed merchant, just a human being, bare, vulnerable, and also lighter than ever. Material loss isn't always a period at the end of a sentence. It can be the beginning of a rare kind of freedom. When we hold too much, we think we're strong, but in truth, we live in constant fear. Fear of losing, of falling behind of the day. People stop looking at us with admiration. We trade away peace to protect assets, status, reputation. And slowly, those very things become the invisible rope that tightens around every breath. We depend on them so much that if they're gone tomorrow, we don't know who we are. The merchant had lived that way, running his life like a money-making machine that never stopped, never rested, never dared miss a beat. But when everything was wiped out, when there were no more contracts to sign, no one bowing hello, nothing left to display, he suddenly saw a truth. For the first time in decades, he wasn't afraid. With nothing to lose, nothing could bind him. And in that seemingly tragic emptiness, he began to ask himself, what do I truly value? Not money, not fame, but the feeling of being a real human being, to breathe, to watch the sunset, to speak slowly with someone you love. He understood success isn't piling up so much that you can hardly walk. It's daring to lighten your load so you can live by what matters most. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself. After that day, he let go of everything that had bound him. The opulent mansion, the cold, superfluous rooms, the expensive suits that felt like armor, all of it was sold. He left the glittering city where every step felt like a race and people smiled with lost eyes. He chose a small seaside village to start again. There, barefoot children chased each other on wet sand each morning, laughing crisp as breaking waves. Elders sipped tea and watched the sun slowly rise from the sea, the light gilding their silver hair and deep, peaceful lines. No one asked what you owned. They asked whether you smiled today. He opened a small shop that sold only used books and tea. Every morning he rose early, swept the leaf-strewn yard, brewed a fragrant pot, and set the old books gently on the shelf as if putting memories back where they belonged. In the afternoons, he chatted with the village kids, telling them what he'd learned from the marketplace, not to teach them how to get rich, but how not to lose themselves as they grew up. And the strangest thing, he had never felt so rich. Not rich in money, but rich in time to breathe slow, rich in peace, to listen to the ocean, rich in human warmth found in genuine smiles, things he once traded everything for and then lost. For the first time, he realized this was the fullness he had spent half a life searching for the wrong way. Have you ever asked yourself, are you truly living or just racing? waking each morning to a long must-do list, coming home exhausted at night, flipping on a mindless show to forget the day, and calling that life. You grind away, skipping meals, skipping sleep, forgetting the eyes waiting for you to come home for dinner. You put off deep talks with friends, quiet moments over tea, just to rack up a few more cold numbers on your scoreboard. But if one day those numbers vanished, would you still know who you are? Would you still have anyone to call? Would you still have somewhere to return to? Not because it's a house, but because someone is waiting there. Sometimes losing everything is what makes us see what truly matters. What isn't really yours won't leave an empty space when it's gone. Only what you've loved deeply leaves a hollow when absent. And the irony, we often grasp their value only after we can no longer hold them. Don't wait until you're emptied out to look back. Look now in the churn of goals and pressure and ask, am I holding what truly matters or just clutching what the world says should matter? Because the most precious thing you might be losing isn't time. It's your life itself. People often think success means standing high, higher than others, higher than yesterday's you so high no one can reach. But the higher you climb, the stronger the wind, and one storm can topple what took years to build. Then you see if your heart isn't steady, the higher you stand, the closer you are to the edge. The merchant had everything: wealth, power, reputation. But deep down, he lived in fear. Fear of loss, of falling behind, of not being respected, if he ever ended up with nothing. Each night, he lay in a luxurious mansion, his heart pounding like a battlefield. On the outside, he was a monument. Inside, he was a man trembling at the prospect of loss. Then the storm hit. The largest ship sank, dragging down the glitter he'd clung to. And something strange happened. He no longer felt like he was about to fall, because there was nothing left to fall from. In that moment of empty hands, he finally stood on solid ground, steady, light, and free. Because he no longer had to keep anything, no longer had to prove anything, only had to live fully as himself. Success isn't measured by the assets you hold, but by the peace you keep when your hands are empty. Only when you stop clinging to anything do you discover who you really are. If you're standing amid ruins today, if your former anchors have suddenly collapsed, if you feel like life has put a period at the end of your page, pause. And remember, sometimes what looks like a period is only a comma. Loss doesn't mean the end. It's a change of seasons. The old closes so the new can begin. But in the storm, we're often blind, thinking the rain will never stop forgetting. The sun never disappears. It's only behind the clouds. What matters isn't what you lost, but who you choose to become afterward. You can let it make you bitter, shut your heart, see life with suspicious eyes. Or you can let it hone you into someone wiser who can tell what's truly worth keeping and what was only shiny illusion. Sometimes, only when the sea takes the ship, do we finally see the vast sky that never belonged to anyone, but is always open to those who dare drop old baggage and begin again. At that moment, you're no longer the one who lost, but the one standing at the threshold of a new chapter, lighter, truer, freer than ever. You don't have to wait for everything to collapse like the merchant to wake up. You don't have to lose it all to see what's real and what's just a glittering shell. You only need to pause amid the rush of goals and pressure and ask yourself a simple question that can shift the way you live. If tomorrow I lost everything, money, reputation, property, position, what would I miss most? And what would I not miss at all? The answer may surprise you. What you'll miss usually isn't the assets, but the seemingly small things. Family meals, a loved one's smile, the peaceful moments you skipped to land one more deal. And what you won't miss may be exactly what's been consuming your time, your mind, your health. Understanding that is the first step toward living genuinely. Keep what nourishes you and release what only imprisons you. Have you ever stood on the beach, looked back at the footprints you left behind, and after just a few passing gusts of wind, a few gentle waves rolling up, they vanished as if they had never existed? Life is like that. The things you're preoccupied with, reputation, status, achievements, failures, things that seem so big they decide a person's entire worth are in truth just footprints in the sand. Sooner or later, the wind will erase them all. The Buddha once taught this, and I want to tell you an old Zen story about footprints in the sand. That noon, the long beach stretched out like a ribbon beneath the pale blue sky. The sun wasn't harsh, just warm enough to make the sea shimmer like it was gilded. Waves lapped softly at the shore, then receded, leaving faint lines of white foam that disappeared as quickly as a breath. On the fine sand, flocks of seagulls circled, calling hoarsely into the wind. The Buddha walked slowly along the shoreline, his simple brown robe fluttering lightly in the salty sea breeze. Behind him were his disciples, each with a contemplative expression. No one spoke. There were only the waves and steady footsteps, like a simple yet endless piece of music. A young disciple, new to following him, walked while quietly watching the clear footprints pressed into the damp sand. They followed one another like a string of beads, straight, steady, and light. A hard-to-name emotion rose in his chest, as if he were witnessing something sacred unfolding right before his eyes. Suddenly he looked up and blurted out, "World-honored one, how wonderful it would be if your footprints could remain here forever, so that in ages to come, those with the fortune to arrive could look upon these footprints and bow in reverence." The whole group stopped. The sea breeze blew a little stronger, stirring everyone's robes. The Buddha did not answer right away. He simply turned back and looked along the sand behind them. The very footprints the disciple had admired had already begun to fade. The sea breeze lifted tiny grains of sand and slowly covered each indentation. A few waves reached up, slid over the shore, then drew back, blurring each imprint. After just a few breaths, the line of seemingly eternal footprints had nearly vanished, as if no one had ever passed that way. The Buddha watched his gaze quiet and deep, like the sea. Then he said, his voice as light as the wind, "Do you see? All footprints are erased by the wind." He bent down and picked up a pinch of sand. The grains gleamed in the sunlight, then slipped away bit by bit, merging into countless others with no way to tell whose trace they had once been. "If you only try to leave footprints in the sand," he continued slowly, "you'll forget that what's most precious isn't the footprints, but each step you live with sincerity." He turned and walked on. The disciples followed in silence. But inside the young disciple, something seemed to break open. He looked down at his own feet, each step pressed into the sand, existing only for a few moments before disappearing. Yet for years, he had lived as if he had to leave eternal footprints, fame, status, accomplishments, so that others would remember his name. But the sea keeps no one's footprints, and life keeps no superficial glory. He looked up at the Buddha ahead, still walking unhurriedly, as if each step left no trace, yet made the world brighter. He suddenly understood. What is eternal is not how long we are remembered, but how we lived moment by moment. The wind blew through and wiped clean the group's footprints on the beach, leaving only the sea glimmering gold and a soul newly washed. Have you ever realized most of your anxiety doesn't live in the present, but in fear? Fear of being forgotten. Fear of leaving nothing behind after passing through this life. We grow up in a society that constantly stresses making a mark. Be outstanding. Be successful. Do great things to prove your existence has meaning. So we rush to collect bits of achievement titles, approving looks, as if without them, life would be meaningless. But the truth is, nothing lasts. Even heroes once loudly praised have their names fade with the pages of old books. Wonders once considered monumental are replaced by newer ones. Mistakes that once kept you up at night, one day, no one remembers them either. Time doesn't distinguish success from failure. It sweeps everything away like foam dissolving into waves like footprints wiped clean by the wind. And if you look into the essence of things, you'll see what's frightening is not being forgotten, but never truly having lived in the days you were given. You cannot control how long people will remember you, but you can decide how you live today, whether you are kind, sincere, and fully present in the smallest things. Because in a world of impermanence, a mark isn't about getting your name carved somewhere. It's about the quality of each moment you live, each look you give someone with compassion, each time you stop to listen, each act you do with your whole heart. And it's precisely those seemingly small things that actually endure. We're often taught life is like a stone statue. You must chisel your mark, build a name, become somebody to be remembered. Each achievement, each compliment, each admiring glance like chisel strokes on stone. We think that without leaving grooves, our existence will vanish. But the truth is, life isn't a stone statue. It's a beach of sand. On sand, no footprint remains forever. The wind will blow, the waves will wash. Time will level everything. And precisely because of that, each step becomes precious. Not because it lasts forever, but because it happens only once. When we accept that everything will pass, we stop obsessing over being remembered, stop living as if performing for the crowd, and begin living as if each day is a fragile gift to be savored. What matters isn't how many footprints you leave, but whether as you walk, you feel each fine grain beneath your feet, the salty sea breeze on your lips, the heartbeat still thumping in your chest. You don't need to live to be remembered. You only need to live to truly live in each unrepeatable second with a fully present heart. In the end, what matters most is not the permanence of a mark, but the aliveness of each moment you pass through. Try just once to look back slowly at your yesterday. You'll see things that once kept you up all night, squeezed your heart, made you feel like the world was collapsing. Now are only blurry fragments of memory, no longer able to stab you like before. You'll recall faces that judged you, words that wounded you deeply, and realize you don't even clearly remember who they were, where they are now, or whether they still care about you. What seemed so big in the past turns out to be so small. It wasn't worth losing your peace over, because time has a wondrous power. It fades every mark, no matter how permanent it seemed at the time. What once was a storm becomes like mist dissolving in the morning sun. So, do you really need to brace yourself against what can't be avoided? Do you really need to win every argument, keep every shred of pride, control every gaze? Or can you choose another way, lighter, truer, and deeper with each day? In the end, what remains is not what others once thought of you, but the spirit with which you lived. When you stop striving to be important, you begin to be free. And that is the value nothing can erase. What made the Buddha the enlightened one wasn't carving his name into history, but that he never tried to. He didn't walk to be admired, didn't teach to be exalted, didn't practice to be credited. He simply walked each step steady, each breath mindful, each gaze filled with compassion. He understood a profound truth. Teachings are like footprints in the sand. They don't exist to become relics, but to transform those who pass by like quiet ripples that, though they vanish, leave the water calmer and clearer. He didn't seek the eternity of a name, but sowed seeds of wakefulness in individual hearts so that each heart could bloom into its own garden. So can you. You don't need to leave a grand monument to prove your life had meaning. You don't need the world to remember your name. It's enough that those who met you feel a little lighter, a little more at peace, a little kinder. Statues will fall, plaques will fade, but kindness, once it touches someone, quietly keeps spreading through countless other lives like a fragrance that never disappears. And that is the deepest way to be present, not to be remembered forever, but to live each day so kindly that you don't need to be remembered yet. Those you've touched won't forget the peace they felt. This world will forget you. That's a truth no one escapes. Your name may disappear from company records. Photos you posted will be swept away by the timeline. Stories about you will dwindle to vague fragments in others' minds. And eventually, no one will remember you were here. But that doesn't make your life meaningless. On the contrary, because everything will fade, each moment you live authentically becomes infinitely precious. The worth of a breeze isn't in how far it travels, but in the cool it brings the instant it brushes your skin. Life is the same. You don't need to leave colossal works or an immortal name. You only need to live each minute you have fully. Live as if you're writing on sand, not to preserve it, but to enjoy the feeling of your hand touching each fine grain, each sweep of ocean air. Don't trade the present to chase some fragile mark in the future, because in the end, what remains isn't what you leave to the world, but what you truly experienced, truly loved, truly lived in these brief yet honest moments. Looking back over the path we've just walked, from the monk's worn shoes, the tears at an old grave, the widow's faded letter, the battle drum haunting a soldier, the old room swept each day, the grandmother's fading photo, the merchant's sunken ship, and the footprints in the sand the Buddha taught about, we see clearly life isn't a place to accumulate, but a place to awaken and let go lightly. Everything we cling to will change color, blur, and dissolve, like footprints erased by wind. Glory fades, pain softens. Only the quality of moments lived with a mindful heart remains, not as matter, but as a gentle imprint in the hearts of those who crossed our path. The Buddha taught that all phenomena are impermanent. Understanding impermanence isn't to make us sad, but to make us cherish. Not to make us resign, but to help us release attachment. Rush less to leave a mark and devote ourselves to living each present moment fully. When the mind is no longer bound by the past, no longer driven by the future, we can truly be present in this life with compassion, mindfulness, and peace. If you felt tired in the grind of competition, if you've been haunted by the pressure of success, others' opinions, or old regrets, I hope these stories have been like a gentle breeze through your heart, reminding you that you don't need to be anyone else, nor leave anything behind except a clear, kind heart. And if these words have reached you, help them reach more hearts. Please subscribe to the Buddhism Seeds channel, click like, share this video, and leave a comment below about what you're learning to let go of. Because perhaps your small story will become a small light, guiding a soul that's lost, just as you paused here today to hear the wind whisper over old footprints, and smile as you keep walking